We're just doing a quick sound check here. And we are good to go. Council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? I am declaring interest in this special meeting at 5 p.m. on the topic of trespass notice. Due to the nature of my relationship with the identifiable individual, I removed myself from the meeting. Are there any further declarations? Not seeing any. I will now call upon Larry Simpson of the Springwater Sports Heritage Board to present. You can take it. Larry, you can take a seat. The microphones are not that great, so if you can take a seat and yeah.
Barb Ma, who is our vice chair, and Paystone, our secretary treasurer. If any mistakes I make tonight, we're responsible for them. The opportunity to be here tonight to provide you with the opportunity to hopefully approve a sponsorship for our induction ceremony. The material, hopefully, that you have received, hopefully explained, so I won't take a lot of your time. We do have an opportunity after, I understand. I'd be more than happy to cover them. So you should have a bit of a draft meeting note that I sent to Councillor Fisher, and I believe it was shared with you prior to the meeting, and also the 2026 official induction sponsorship opportunity was sent as well, and that went out to all the other sponsors. We've had to increase our costs this year, and we had to make a decision whether we should increase the price for sponsorship or increase the sponsors. For better, for worse, we chose to add sponsors. We do have a number of people who are willing to contribute, and we thought it would be fair to do that. The costs have gone up since we began in 2014, when our ticket prices were $50, and now they have to be at $75. The role that Springwater Sports Heritage plays, I believe, is, I'm a little biased, you might understand, I believe serves the township well. I believe very much in the support we've been getting from the township, in particular from the administrative staff who we deal with. They're very patient people, thank goodness. I believe that we will be contributing to the brand of the township if you agree to become a sponsor. The decision that we made in the beginning about a Hall of Fame was, I think, a wise one, and it's proving to be so far, in that we are so far almost 100% virtual. And we continue to go down that road. And the coming of AI, which many of us are using now, seems to fit very well. I'd just like to give some stats about our website, which is our virtual being. Last year, 2025, we had 250,000 visits. And during those visits, over 0.8 million pages were looked at. This year, we have an induction coming, and that's why I'm here. And I know those hits, if you like, will go up, because during the induction year, there is a lot more involved in the website. We have reached 255 alumni now, 25 athletes, 24 builders, and the remainder are team members. Some of them are athletes and builders, athletes and team members, and so on. The only other thing I'm going to try and do is excite you a little bit. I'm going to show you a video of our dream where we talk about what we might be able to do in the community hub. So if we could get the video to play now, and then I'll turn it back and hopefully there'll be some questions. Easy questions.
As we continue to grow and develop, it is important to connect with our community and preserve our past. That is why Springwater Sports Heritage is proposing the installation of an interactive screen within the upcoming community center that will showcase and celebrate Springwater's historic sports achievements. Facilities like this already connect with an athletic culture through the associations of arenas, gyms, and pools. So, the installation of an interactive screen will enhance this culture and allow us to preserve and celebrate the rich sporting accomplishments and activities of the Township of Springwater, showcasing the historical achievements of our local athletes, builders, and teams, while allowing visitors to recognize and view the accomplishments and awards of Springwater's inductees. The interactive screen will be a modern and futuristic addition to our community center with an immersive experience to encourage and validate the next generation that they too can become the next inspiring Hall of Famer that started in our small town. It will remind us to dream big and go for it while never forgetting where we came from. In summary, the installation of an interactive screen in the upcoming Springwater Community Center will preserve and celebrate our rich sporting heritage, incorporate innovative technology, enhance our athletic culture, engage the community, and inspire future generations. The principle is solid and the options are unlimited, so we hope you will support our proposal and help us create a lasting legacy for Springwater sports heritage.
I don't have anything else to add. Hopefully the material I've given you and your own experience, many of you have been at the banquets and recognize what we do there and how it's received in the public. I think every photo we have on our webpage, there's a smile on everybody's face, which makes me smile.
Oh, that's great.
So
Thank you very much. And I will have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor and we'll open it up for questions. I have Councillor Fisher and Deputy Cabral. And at this time I can turn to members of council for any comments or questions. Councillor Fisher.
First off, I'd like to actually support the $2,500 going from the Springwater Swing to the Springwater Sports Heritage. As a member of the committee, it's a lot of good work that they do and a lot of planning that goes into it. I think a few of us, I do remember, were at the dinner. It was a great event. A lot of people from years gone by who were very happy to be acknowledged for their sporting achievements in the past. But there is a lot of work, particularly of the executive committee. I just ride along with them, but particularly from the executive committee that goes into that. And certainly I think a $2,500 donation from the council is well warranted. So I'll put that forward.
Okay. Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and to echo Councillor Fisher's sentiments, Larry, thanks for being here tonight. And I'm a big supporter of the Springwater Sports Heritage team. You folks have done a great job. I've also had the opportunity to attend the last 2 or 3 banquets to see, as you noted, over 255 alumni. That's pretty special. The players, the builders, the teams. Every year I get to sit with a new group of people, or every other year, I guess it is. And the stories I hear, none of it surprises me because, again, like you said, there's lots of smiles on faces. So I'm happy to second Councillor Fisher's recommendation for the $2,500.
Councillor Fisher.
The food's always really good. So
Yes, so I do have that moved. We have an amendment moved by Councillor Fisher and seconded by Councillor Garwood to have the $2,500 included in that. All those in favor of the amendment? That has passed. And before we do go back to the main motion as amended, Larry, thank you very much. I have had many years. I've actually since the induction of the Sports Heritage, so I've been along since the beginning of it, and it's really exciting. Hopefully we can finally get a building and get some bricks and mortar and get this up there. So thank you for everything that you and the committee continues to do for our township. So.
thank you for your kindness.
And back to the main motion, all those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you.
You're clapping me out?
And next we will move on to our item number 5, and we'll call upon WSP Planning for the presentation, please. And welcome.
We have a member joining virtually that will kick things off.
No, and I do see Mr. Bender there.
Okay, great. Good evening. Hard act to follow, I have to say, but let's keep the smiles and the if you want to applaud, that'd be great too. Let's keep that going. I appreciate that. If I could get the next slide, please. Great. So good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Greg Bender. I'm the Director of Planning at WSP here in support of the growth management study that you've retained WSP and Watson Associates to undertake. I may look or my name may be familiar to you. I was actually involved in the official plan process and looking forward to having this discussion. It's nice to see you all again. Hope you've been well. As you're aware, Frank Marzo from WSP is the PM. He's unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for him, he's on vacation this week. So I've been asked to attend this meeting to present the growth management study to you. I'm not, unfortunately, there in person. I'm recovering from surgery, so I do appreciate the leniency to allow me to attend virtually. However, there in person, in the flesh, you have members from the project team. You've got Adam Fisher and Daryl Labs from Watson. They're going to speak to the growth forecast. They're going to speak to the land needs analysis and the fiscal analysis. I, along with Antoine from WSP, will be speaking to, I'll be speaking to planning. Antoine will be speaking to servicing matters. So looking, as I mentioned, looking forward to the discussion. Next slide, please. We have a fairly lengthy presentation. We've been asked to be a bit robust given where we are in the process, and especially given the amount of work and details that go into discussing growth forecast, land needs, fiscal impact, as well as servicing. So we have a pretty robust presentation here this evening, and looking forward to the discussion, any questions that you may have. So we're going to cover a bit of the background, always exciting planning policy context, which seems to change as the days progress. We've got a discussion around growth forecast, land needs assessment, employment area expansion, recommendations associated with all that, and then we're going to get into fiscal impact, servicing analysis, and then sort of the policy justification that'll round up the discussion. Next slide, please. Next to up to 5. The next one. As I mentioned, the touch in through policy-related studies for some time, about 10 years. You'll recall that or some of you may recall that in 2016, the township began their official plan review. At that time was meant to conform to the county's official plan, which came into force in effect, I think, around 2014. The purpose of that review was to not only reflect the changes in county policy, but also an updated growth management framework, because as you can imagine, things change over time, and it's important to be reflective of those changes. Several key studies were initiated to address sort of the needs and reflect the changes at the municipality. So those included at the time additional growth management study, population-related employment land market study, intensification strategy, corridor study, and again, a subsequent land needs analysis. In the summer 2023, the official plan was adopted by yourselves, and that really plans for growth to 2031. Doesn't seem like that far away. However, since then, the county also has a new official plan again, and it's important to really understand those extended forecasts, that extended horizon, and understand what that means for the municipality. So that's why the municipality embarked on a growth management study, which we're here this evening to discuss. Next slide, please. I mentioned, perhaps candidly, that there have been a number of policy changes since the official plan came in force in effect. We joke in the planning profession that, things change as the days progress, and so do the names. They become even more creative as the bills are proposed. the Helping Home Buyers Protecting Tenants Act, the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act. I could make up a word and it probably would sound something that would fit in. But a number of things have been proposed. The Bill 97 was brought forward to change, in part, not entirely, but in part, it changed the definition of area employment under the Planning Act. And what that did was caused many municipalities to reconsider how their employment areas accommodate growth for the horizon or to the horizon of their official plan. By changing the definition, it really narrowed the focus on what employment areas are to sort of accommodate and achieve. So what it did was employment areas really relate to warehousing, manufacturing, but they do now specifically exclude institutional uses, commercial uses such as retail and offices. This has caused many municipalities in Ontario to, again, reconsider their land needs for employment uses over the long-term horizon of their official plan. In 2024, Bill 185 came into effect. What that did is it allowed for a bit more flexibility on how settlement boundary expansions were to occur. Previously, it was only to be led by a municipality through a municipal comprehensive review. It's been softened to allow for separate exercises to occur, whether they be private or publicly led. You also have the situation of removing a lot of the provincial policy documents or revising the provincial policy documents, whether they be revocation of the growth plan and changing of the provincial policy statement to the provincial planning statement, which I still struggle with on a daily basis, remembering that name. Nevertheless, what also changed is the planning horizon and sort of how long municipalities can determine how they're going to accommodate growth or evolve over a certain period. Before it was 20 years, and now it's up to 30 years. And you can even go beyond that as you plan for certain types of uses or pieces of infrastructure. So for instance, you can go beyond that if there are strategic opportunities to protect or conserve employment lands. You can look at also understanding how you're going to service hard infrastructure, public service facilities, other things as it relates to that. So it's important to understand how that could be taken advantage of, or at least considered as municipalities plan for the future. So this is my background, and then I'll turn it over to Adam and from Watson, and he'll talk to you a bit about the growth forecasts.
Thanks, Greg. And if we could move to the next slide, please. So just to reiterate on a couple points from Greg, the intent of this exercise, particularly around the growth forecasting, is really to work with those numbers that were conducted as part of that Simcoe County exercise back in 2022. So those forecasts for the township go out to 2051. We're embracing those numbers. But as Greg mentioned, since then, the provincial planning statement has been updated to allow municipalities to look out to a 30-year horizon. So prior, that 2051 was that kind of maximum threshold. And so we've extended the Simcoe County work out to 2056 to understand the land implications associated with that. And the land need analysis is really the kind of fundamental piece of our exercise from the Watson planning side of things to understand how much land is needed to accommodate residential growth. When I say residential, that also includes population-related employment, so jobs that essentially serve the population. And then, of course, we also look at industrial jobs or those employment area jobs as a distinct category as well. So that Simcoe County work at the time, what they did is they used regional market areas was a term that they combined several municipalities to form the north and several municipalities to form the south. And there wasn't a clear land needs by each municipality. And so we've been tasked to understand those land needs for the township of Springwater specifically through this exercise, again, building on that scope of 7 work from the county. So if we can go to the next slide, please, just to provide some broader context. One of the things that the province is now emphasizing is for municipalities to assess the Ministry of Finance projections. And so the Ministry of Finance, they release these on an annual basis. As you can see, there's several lines on the screen here starting in 2021 and going up to 2025. And so we like to take a bit of a broader lens and more of a historical lens when we look at these. And so you can start, it might be a little difficult on the screen here in person, but you can see that light blue line for 2021 was a population forecast for the county of around 773,000 people. When we went into 2022, the ministry continued to improve their outlook, again, further doing so for 2023. However, since 2023, we have started to see the Ministry of Finance take a more conservative stance on growth for the province, and particularly for jurisdictions in that greater Golden Horseshoe area, which would include the county. And you can see that those growth forecasts are starting to come back down a little bit. So they are moderating, but again, still within that range of when we're looking at this initial period from 2021, from their peak in 2023. So this is all to say that there is a broader growth context that's unfolding. We know, development across the province has been slow, immigration declining. Of course, these short-term economic uncertainties are disrupting the near term, but we are looking out 30 years and continuing to take that long-term progressive stance when we assess growth. And so with that context being given on the next slide, we can see the Springwater forecast, and this is population out to 2056. Again, we are utilizing that Scopa 7 forecast to 2051 and building on that and extending it out an additional 5 years to 2056, which would bring us to a population of approximately 33,670 people. And so this, and on the following slide, the housing is what we use as a foundational part of the analysis when looking at the land needs. So if we could go to the next slide, please. As you can see here, we've demonstrated the housing forecast, and it's broken up in 5-year increments. So this slide represents new housing growth, not total housing growth, but just any new housing development that's forecast in the township over the next 30 years. And you can see that's broken out in those 5-year pieces. So we certainly have had quite a historic rise between 2006 to 2021. And we really did see building activity quite strong in 2021 and 2022. And of course, that has begun to taper off over the last 3 years with building permit activity below about 100 units a year. So we have started to see a bit of a slowdown in the township for that building activity, but that isn't a unique case to the township. We work in a lot of municipalities across the province, and few and far between are seeing increased growth. So it is a challenging time across the province right now. With that being said, we are, as I said, looking out 30 years, and you can see that there is a forecast increase in the housing activity over the longer term, which starts to taper off at the end. And that taper is largely to do with the aging of the population. So as the population gets older, there's more homes that are existing and they start to turn over. And so that need for new housing is less so over the forecast period. We also look at housing mix through this slide. So you can see we've broken it out into several structure types. So low density is single and semi-detached households. Medium density is townhomes and duplexes. And high density is stacked townhomes, apartments, and secondary units. I know secondary units might be an odd thing to hear in a high density category, but we do that based on occupancy. So what's the average number of people living in these units? It's more similar to an apartment than it is a low density dwelling. And so you can see we are forecasting a shift over this period where the low density is kind of tapering off, if you will, down to about 60% of new development by the end of this period. And this isn't certainly not to suggest that high density growth will be the predominant form of housing in Springwater. As you can see, we still are forecasting quite a significant amount of low and medium. And again, this is new housing activity. So we layer this on top of the existing households within the township as well. And as we know, there is a significant amount of singles and semis. And again, over the forecast period, those would start to turn over more, provide continued opportunities for families to immigrate or migrate into the township. And so that represents a bit of a background on the population and housing. And on the next slide, we get into employment. And again, quite a similar story here where we are taking those numbers from the county-wide work to 2051, the 9,200 that you can see there, and extending out an additional 5 years. So when we look at this forecast, as I said, we like to look at the employment really in kind of two broad buckets. You can see there's rural employment in that pie chart, but there's also population-related employment. Again, jobs that serve the population. They don't necessarily draw residents to the community. Of course, they can, office jobs and the like, but we also have the category of employment, land employment. And so this, again, gets back to Greg's comments about that new definition from the province of what is an employment area. It used to be you could have commercial jobs, you could have office, you could have institutional uses within employment areas, and those were protected. So if there was a need or a want for a landowner to convert those lands to residential, there's a lot more protection from the province to say, no, these are strategically important employment lands for industrial purposes. That definition has changed to just limit that to industrial jobs. So when we look at our forecast, and when I'll get to later on the employment area side of things, when we talk about land needs for employment areas, we're really focusing in on that industrial segment of jobs within the township. If we go to the next slide, please. We have a couple components in this section, the first of which is getting into a bit of a scenario testing, and I'll explain that in a second, and then, of course, diving into the land needs. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we are utilizing that Simcoe County Scopa 7 forecast. With that being said, of course, we understand there's a lot of change and activity occurring in the township, and so we wanted to understand a bit of a sensitivity testing to look at, if growth were to materialize at a faster rate, what might be the implication of that instead of just utilizing that countywide work. And so scenario 1 there represents the forecast that I've walked through thus far, and that represents a growth rate of about 1.2%. We've looked at a second scenario, which says, okay, let's look back over the last 25 years and look at what the township's share of growth in several periods has been. And so as you can see, between 2021 and 2024, the township saw about 8% of the countywide growth. So we said, okay, if we maintain that share moving forward, what would that look like from a growth perspective? And so that would represent about 1.7% population growth annually over the forecast. And then scenario 3, taking even more of an aggressive stance on that, looking at what if that share of growth in the township continued to take a greater piece of the pie of that countywide outlook. And so those 3 scenarios represent a kind of range of potential as it relates to population and housing growth. Of course, this is, again, a sensitivity testing analysis, and it does fit within the framework of that countywide growth. So we are suggesting that overall pie, if you will, again, the Ministry of Finance is looking at this broader growth potential, across the greater Golden Horseshoe, across Simcoe County, and there's only so much migration into specific areas of the province. There's only so much immigration, so it's a matter of what is that kind of upper threshold, and how do we balance new development and immigration in that standpoint? I'll circle back to this on a future slide, but that gives you a bit of a context for potential range of activity or growth. And this slide here is simply a summary slide. So we have our 2021 numbers on the left, 2051, again, representing the Scopa 7 for population and employment, and then our 2056 numbers. So I won't spend too much time on this one, and I'll move on to the next slide. And again, this builds on our sensitivity testing just to look at, again, we have our forecast that we've put forward, but what if growth were to materialize at a much faster rate? Would the township be in a position where there might not be enough land to accommodate growth? And so there's a lot going on this slide. I apologize, it's a bit busy, but we have the bars there that you can see in the light blue represent the housing forecast, again, that we've put forward as that scenario 1. And then you can see there's a star there, which represents that scenario 3. So if we looked at a significantly faster rate of growth at about 2%, again, kind of extrapolating historical trends with that township share of growth increasing, what would that mean in terms of growth against the supply? And as you can see, if we're not accounting for the minister's zoning order, there would be sufficient land to 2056 to accommodate even in that increased level of growth. And then if you also factor in the available land or the available supply to accommodate growth with the MZO, there's quite a significant amount of potential that can absorb that growth. So suffice to say, there is quite a runway in terms of residential growth in the township. And this isn't to say that, you don't have to look at this again for 30 years. Typically, municipalities in the province, 5 or so, maybe 10 years, they continue to relook at this, right? And so 10 years from now, you might be looking out to 2066 and see how growth is materialized and if there's starting to be maybe a potential constraint closing in. But as we see it right now, there's a pretty significant supply of land to accommodate residential and population-related jobs. If we can go to the next slide, please. And this really just summarizes the baseline forecast or the baseline land needs using that baseline forecast, scenario 1, to demonstrate the surplus of housing units that are forecast. Again, in this scenario, which extends the scope of 7 work, and so under that, there would be a surplus of about 9,000 housing units by 2056. So quite a significant amount of land that can accommodate growth over the longer term. And if we then move into employment, I have 2 slides here, and I might just suggest we skip ahead one more to get away from the details and speak a little more broadly. Thank you. So again, when I say employment area here, this gets back to the definition Greg spoke to earlier, and I was mentioning really getting into the industrial segment. So this is a quite distinct land category, a distinct job type. These are obviously, important jobs for a community to grow, to attract residents, skilled jobs, high paying jobs. And we want to make sure that we have the land to be able to accommodate that and not put the municipality in a position where they can't accommodate businesses that are looking to locate here. So again, and when I should have mentioned this earlier, but when I say land needs, this is focused on the urban segment, so serviced growth. So this would be serviced employment or serviced industrial development. And again, that scope of 7 work lumped everything into those regional market areas. So we didn't have that picture of the township specific analysis. And so that's really what we're getting here. And so based on the employment forecast, and again, more details are on the previous slide if you desire to look at that, there's a demand for nearly 70 net hectares of employment area development. And the supply is quite small at about 16 hectares of vacant land still remaining, which would suggest that that supply is shrinking quite fast. And it will be, it already is tight, but it's getting tighter. And so by 2056, that would suggest about a 53 net hectare deficit. As you can see in that last bubble, we do what's called a contingency to account for any other factors that could increase that growth outlook. And that brings us to 61 net hectares. There's a lot of numbers on the slide here, so I'll throw one more at you, but net hectares doesn't account for infrastructure and, such as local roads within an employment area, stormwater ponds. And so if you gross that land area up, you're looking at about 81 hectares of shortfall. So an additional 80 hectares of land would be required to accommodate employment area or industrial jobs over that 30-year forecast. And my friends at WSP will speak a little bit more about looking at this beyond 2056, because again, that provincial policy does allow that. And so I think we'll transition to that now with Greg.
Thanks, Adam. So if I could have a couple of slides advanced, there's just a title slide around, potential employment expansion areas. Thanks. So you've heard that we're extending the planning horizon to 2056. You've heard Adam say that there's no identified need for residential lands to 2056, but there is a need for employment lands. And as he mentioned, there's a gross deficit of about 81 hectares. Because you can plan for the beyond the 30-year horizon, and because of the new definition, which sort of requires municipalities to rethink their employment land strategy and their associated permissions, it's recommended that the township be proactive around planning for growth beyond the 2056 horizon, specifically around employment. The provincial planning statement requires lower tier municipalities to base all of their work on upper tier forecasts, which we're doing. The issue is that what Adam mentioned is that gap between 2051 and 2056, because the county hasn't forecasted sort of their numbers to account to 2056. So this study will support updated county forecasts when they're prepared. And once those forecasts are incorporated in the county official plan, the township will be required to update its official plan accordingly. Just generally speaking, as it relates to just changing the numbers and making sure that they align. So just in summary, as a result of the current findings, based on the Watson work, we sort of pivoted from examining opportunities for expanding residential lands in the township to identifying potential locations for employment lands, because that's where we found the deficit and something that allows a bit more flexibility and long-term thinking around sort of protection and conservation of those lands. It is consistent with the provincial planning statement, and because the preference was given to areas that were adjacent to existing settlement areas or contiguous to existing settlement areas and in proximity to major good movement corridors. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You have sort of two major good movement corridors township, Highway 400, especially 400 will only increase over time. It is important to make sure, just to touch on, as I mentioned, sort of proximity to a settlement area like Midhurst. It's the largest settlement area in your township. It's expected to be sort of the destination for the majority of population growth of 2056 per the PPS. It's where your growth is to be directed. Yes, there are other settlement areas in the municipality, but primarily the growth is to be directed to Midhurst because that's where the significant investment of infrastructure and associated services are being accommodated. So as this area evolves over time, as Adam mentioned, as your residential lands build out, you'll need additional employment opportunities to accommodate the individuals moving or relocating into the municipality. So based on these considerations, two study areas were identified as shown on the slide. You've got the lands around the 400 and to in proximity to 26. If I can get the next slide, please. So these two study areas are further evaluated with support, obviously, from township staff. Several factors contributed to the selection of the Highway 400 lands as a recommended expansion. First, the lands along Highway 26 are constrained by the presence of a hydro corridor and significant natural heritage resources, and really don't represent a logical contiguous land assembly that can accommodate the additional employment lands of 81 gross hectares. Also, the previous direction from council asked staff to consider lands east of Midhurst along Highway 400 for potential employment land expansions, and to review infrastructure that would be available to build out these lands over time. Given how strategic they are along Highway 400, we certainly we're looking at that as well. There's also ongoing investments in infrastructure upgrades that would support development and build out of lands adjacent to Highway 400, such as Intersect 4 and so based on all these parameters, the study area located on lands east of Midhurst settlement area towards Highway 400 have been recommended to accommodate a settlement area boundary expansion of about 280 hectares, inclusive of the 81 hectares required by the land needs assessment. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit about sort of stretching this a bit and being strategic. So the land needs the area has been adjusted to account for sort of a logical extension to the existing settlement area in Midhurst, and to establish a strategic agency and location around a highway interchange. Lands to the south of the study area were not selected as they were deemed a bit too close to the Barrie expansion, while lands to the north of the recommended study were considered less desirable as they do not align well with existing settlement area and are less strategic with relation to the existing highway interchange. So these lands are being recommended to be added to the Midhurst settlement area boundary, but will retain their current land use designations because you can't, because they wouldn't be necessarily representing supply until the need has been identified. But it is a bit of a strategic flag to put up to say, these are important, these need to be protected, and we don't want sort of other uses to prevent, the township's vision of these areas evolving into an employment area over time. You're already on the recommendations. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. So the recommendations. So land needs analysis shows that there's a surplus of residential land. So adding more community land to the settlement area is not recommended at this time. However, the analysis also identified a shortage of employment land, which I've discussed. As a result, it's recommended that the municipality proactively plan beyond that 30-year horizon by expanding the settlement area to accommodate future employment uses. A phased approach is necessary to bring employment lands into the urban boundary, with around 280 hectares proposed for additional land as part of the current growth management exercise. These lands are recommended for addition, are located at the intersection of Highway 400 and Forbes Road, which is highly strategic for future townships and employment infrastructure, given the proximity to Highway 400. Land owned by township terminal land, term employment land reserve recommended to be in two distinct overlays as shown on the
Senator, I
slide.
apologize for interrupting you.
Um,
If you could start that slide over again, you're just breaking up a little bit here.
Oh, I apologize. Can we go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So I can start this over. I'll be quick.
No, we got that one. It was just.
Oh, you did?
When you moved on to the next one, you were breaking up there.
Okay. Apologies. So if I can get this slide advanced again, sorry. In addition to the lands shown on this particular slide, which are being recommended to be added to the settlement area as part of the 2025 growth management study, it's recommended that the township introduce two overlays as shown on this particular slide that will sort of signal the intent for the township to preserve these lands for the long term. It's an overlay. It'll be used as a set on top of the land use designation, just as a bit of a trigger to say, and provide policy guidance around what you can and can't do on these lands. It's intended to provide a transition area between intended employment uses along the 400 and the residential community currently under development on the west side of Russell Road. The long-term employment reserve overlay is intended to identify lands on either side of the 400 as a strategic employment asset, given its proximity to the highway. The identification is supported by provincial policy, which emphasizes the need for municipalities to proactively plan and develop strategic sites for employment. So by identifying these lands as a reserve, the township is being proactive and again, conserving those lands for the future. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it over to Daryl.
Thanks, Greg. Next slide, please. And so as part of this study, we took a look at the financial impact analysis of the growth and development that's anticipated to 2056. We followed the methodology that's seen on the screen here, and this methodology is consistent with the methodology utilized in the 2020 long-range financial plan and with the way that our firm approaches municipal financial impact analysis. And really what we're trying to look at the end of the day, if we have all of the revenues and expenses, what's the net impact on your budgets, on your tax-supported budget or on your rate-supported budget arising from the development. And so what we have here really up in the top left in the blue boxes is the proposed growth in population employment. And with that population employment comes new houses and new non-residential buildings. From there, that's going to generate new assessment. That's going to generate new tax revenue. Excuse me. We're also going to have new non-tax revenue, fees, fines, fares, things like that, that arise from the population and new employees. So that's the revenue side of things. We're also going to have expenditures. And so with new people, new jobs comes operating expenditures. We have operating expenditures related to infrastructure. So for example, you build new subdivisions, you get new roads, you have to plow those roads, maintain those roads and things like that. There's also operating expenditures related more to the population for other services that we also incorporate into the analysis. And so we take all of that, and we add on as well the expenditures related to the new capital items that are constructed. So you get new roads, new water mains, new sewer mains. Once those are installed and dedicated to the municipality, you then have the obligation to replace those at the end of their useful life. And so we incorporate an annual life cycle replacement cost into the analysis. And so we add all those together and we get the net impact on your tax supported and your rate supported budgets. So we really looked at two different scenarios. We looked at the anticipated growth within the township to 2056. And then separately, we looked at the addition of those additional employment lands that Greg just talked about. Next slide, please. And so there's some considerations that we need to make just before looking at the results of the financial impact analysis. Really what we're doing is looking at a snapshot in time. We're basing the tax revenues off of today's rates. We're looking at the capital costs and everything in today's dollars. Okay, it still gives us an idea of what the pressure is on the tax rates or the water wastewater rates arising from the development. But that can change over time. When we look at the growth related infrastructure, a lot of that's going to be funded on the tax supported side with development charges. On the water wastewater rate supported side, generally in your municipality, you have the developers come together with the landowners group and fund the water wastewater projects themselves. Once those are constructed, though, all of that infrastructure then gets dedicated to the municipality, and then it's your liability to maintain and replace. The other thing to keep in mind when we see these results is that you have fairly low tax rates relative to a number of other municipalities. And so we took a look at the BMA municipal study that was done in 2024. You can see your residential tax rates are about 65% below the average. Commercial are about 69% below the average, and industrial rates are about 171% below the average. And so, it's just something to keep in mind when we see the results. What it kind of provides a little bit of background about the impacts. I know a lot of what we hear from the development community and others is that, well, we're going to build houses, you're going to get tax revenue. But again, we're trying to keep in mind that yes, you get tax revenue, but there's all these other costs that come along with it. Okay. Next slide, please. And so what we're looking at for the build out of the current settlement area boundary or the growth to 2056 is we're looking at about 9,200 people, 5,100 residential units, and just over 1,100 jobs. With that, we're looking at growth related costs. So on the tax supported side is $220 million. And on the rate supported side, the water wastewater, it's $183 million. Okay, so just keeping in mind, once that's built, constructed, even if it's paid for development charges, it gets incorporated into the analysis as an annual life cycle cost. And so looking at the net impact on the tax supported budget, what this shows is an annual deficit. So if all the buildings built out, we had the same tax rates and the same cost of infrastructure, at the end of the day, there would be a deficit on the budget of about $527,000, which is about 2% of your 2025 tax levy. So what that means realistically is there's upward pressure to increase taxes arising from this development. It's a relatively marginal amount in the grand scheme of things, the 2% relative to the overall levy you currently have. And when we think about residential development, typically residential development does provide a net impact on the budget where it does provide upward pressure on taxes. When we look at the water wastewater, the rate supported budget, we actually see a surplus. And in part, this is because a couple years ago, if you recall, we did the water wastewater rate study. As part of that process, we made sure to incorporate the full cost recovery, which incorporate all the life cycle and asset management costs. And as a result of increasing those rates and those proposed increases, we're seeing kind of as we develop and grow, we're seeing a surplus on the budget rather than a deficit or a net impact, meaning we don't have increased pressure to increase the rates arising from this development. It's actually the opposite. We're finding some efficiencies there. Next slide, please. When we look at now is just looking at the employment area expansion, that additional about 81 hectares, gross hectares. And so when we're looking at this, we're looking at just the 4,200 additional jobs. We're looking at capital expenditures estimated about $41 million for tax supported, 82 for rate supported. And what we see is a deficit on the tax supported side of about 3% of your existing levy. And on the rate supported side of about almost $2 million for the rate supported budget. Now, one thing to keep in mind with respect to this is if we're just looking at employment area lands, one of the challenges is trying to estimate what the revenues, the water wastewater rate revenues are going to be. You can have a warehouse that uses basically no water, wastewater, or you can have a glass factory that uses a ton of water, wastewater. If you do get those heavier uses, then this picture would look a lot different. It would provide more revenue. But when the infrastructure is constructed, it needs to be built generally for employment lands. And so again, this is kind of an average revenue approach that would need to be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Understanding that these lands would be developed in the future, kind of towards the end of that 2056 forecast. So again, will be reviewed as you go. Next slide, please. And so kind of mentioned, this is a point in time. What we're looking at here in this analysis is the net annual impact on the budget at the end of the forecast period. And finding that there's upward pressure on tax rates is consistent with what was found in the 2020 Long Range Financial Plan. And a big driver in that is increase in infrastructure costs. Municipalities across the province and more broadly across the country are facing this with your asset management requirement to indicate what the life cycle costs are and properly financially plan for those. We're seeing increased pressure on tax rates. Some of the deficits estimated are based on current tax rates. So if you have future anticipated tax rates in the coming years, that would mitigate some of that deficit. Again, because what we're looking at here is just that upward pressure on your current tax rates. The water wastewater surplus, again, consistent with the approach that we took with the water wastewater rate study. And again, just mentioning that the deficit on the employment land side is a result of using averages, and if you do get a water user or get an employment use that's a heavy water user, you will see higher revenues and reduction of that anticipated deficit. And next slide, please. And I'll pass it over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Antoine. So I'm here to describe a little bit of the servicing situation tied to these employment lands in this growth area. My colleagues have done a great job of establishing a need, talking about the fiscal impact. I'm here to tell you whether or not you'll get water and sanitary services. Given that this site is currently outside the settlement boundary, the last master plan that was completed didn't quite exactly capture it in detail. So the work that we've done really is, call it maybe a high level review of the various studies that are available that speak to future infrastructure, planned infrastructure. So we're very much kind of contextualizing the servicing in that lens a little bit. Naturally, with this falling outside of the master plan lens, and Adam alluded to some studies having to be reoccurring every 5 or 10 years, as we get closer to this planning horizon, or maybe even in your next infrastructure master plan, these lands might become more formalized and fit within those studies. So you'll be able to kind of get a more refined picture of strategies and how different priorities can help set the stage for this growth. But today I'm here to kind of summarize what we found and whether it might work or not. So if we can go please to the next slide. So the big picture idea is understand the site's influence on surrounding services and to define the needs for this area. We started our study with a few water consumption and wastewater generation calculations just to help kind of contextualize and understand volumes. From a water consumption side, we used typical design assumptions that are very much consistent with employment lands across the province. So there was nothing very, controversial in the numbers that we were using. And on the wastewater side, we actually took a bit more of a conservative approach. Sanitary tends to be bottlenecks when you're looking at servicing. Water networks are flexible. They can handle a little bit more stress, but sanitary systems, when they're full, they're full. So we took a bit more of a conservative approach on the sanitary numbers and used an average day flow that's more in line with the water consumption. As like Daryl defined, as we start to get to know what the users will be and more of those details, the more accurate, the jargon in infrastructure is dry weather and wet weather flow numbers, we can get to defining those a little bit more precisely. But for now, the servicing report that accompanies this study took a bit more of a broad look, remaining on the conservative side. If I can get the next slide, please. So now comes the context. We're trying to understand, do we have today infrastructure or future infrastructure that can support the growth area? And will this growth area have a negative or positive impact on its neighbors? We all want to be nice neighbors, right? So from a physical infrastructure perspective, there's currently a plan for the Midhurst Height development next door, which is going to be bringing servicing right to the doorstep of these lands. That includes both water and sanitary. The currently planned water main is sized as a 300 millimeter main. Now, from my experience, that's an appropriately sized main for this type of land use. Employment lands traditionally, again, to Daryl's point, sometimes have high consumption rates, sometimes low consumption rates. Really, the big factor for industrial and employment lands is fire flow and emergency protection. So at that size with the 300, it's a very robust main and should be able to provide the fire protection needed, barring internal looping and servicing of the actual site itself, which would be subject to further studies down the line once we know what's going where and what the roads will look like. From more of a vertical perspective, call it pump stations and supplies, water treatment and storages. Our study discovered that there are currently a lot of big pieces of vertical infrastructure and water supply infrastructure that are part of your plans. And that plan currently would accommodate this growth. And we would have enough space with the current numbers that we've seen and reviewed that are part of these plans to fit this employment lands as part of the current water treatment plant and the current water supply scheme and projections that you have. Same thing on the wastewater. Now, I understand the sanitary is more of a phased approach. We're talking about kind of far down the line here, but it's the same idea. The plan and the strategy that's currently in place from a sanitary perspective would accommodate the additional wastewater loads that would be generated from this site. Next slide, please. This is my summary. So, as I said at the onset there, so while these subject lands are not currently serviced and not in the existing master plan due to their location outside the settlement boundary area, the analysis demonstrated that the projected employment-related water and wastewater demands are very much manageable as part of your long-term servicing strategy. At a high-level servicing, so the high-level servicing review that was completed really does support the expansion and suggests that it would fit. Now, naturally, I alluded to this a few times throughout my short presentation here, but your next master plan or maybe the cycle after that ought to start thinking about considering these lands as part of it so you can formalize the strategy. And as you get closer to breaking ground in these lands, more engineering studies ought to be considered and executed to really kind of iron out those details. But from a big picture, there's a good roadmap here. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Antoine. If I can just get to the next slide, please, around the criteria. Thanks. So PPS talks about sort of criteria that municipalities shall consider around boundary expansions. There's 6 criteria. They range from ensuring sort of that you have the need identified. That would be satisfied by the work that we're doing now, the land needs analysis. B talks about capacity, which Antoine just discussed. So there's current capacity and designs and certainly something that can be improved over time to service this area. Midhurst Heights and the pipes and the roads and Craig and Forbes Road investments certainly will help satisfy that criteria. C, D, and E are primarily related to ag. There's a subsequent slide that'll talk a bit more about that. But it relates to, where you can't avoid prime ag. You should avoid prime ag, but if you can't, look towards sort of lower priority ag lands. As you're all well aware, it's difficult to even throw a stone and not hit prime ag around Midhurst. So the discussion is how we can best sort of configure lands to avoid as much land as possible. Will they comply with minimum distance separation? We completed a preliminary desktop review of potential livestock sites and determined that additional calculations may be required, but it's not anticipated that the MDS itself will significantly impact the total area and the land to be added as recommended. There's impacts on agricultural systems which should be avoided, and where you can't, then you have to mitigate. That will likely require further study depending on any additional work that has to be completed at that time. And F is really phasing to make sure that you're doing this in a logical manner. You're leapfrogging these or going all the way over to the other side of a highway, perhaps when it would cost more to service. Next slide, please. So this is what I was talking about, the additional sort of visual sort of explanation of the ag lands. So as I mentioned, Midhurst is bordered on all sides by prime ag land, or there's natural heritage constraints. So it's unavoidable to expand for long-term employment uses and not hit agricultural land. About 60% of the employment expansion area is on prime ag, and the expansion of these lands represent about 0.55% of the town's overall agricultural base. So yes, there is an impact, but relatively minor, especially given its proximity to both the Midhurst settlement area and the highway. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about just the summary. So just the summary of the growth management work that we've done. It was determined that residential lands are sufficient to 2056, while there is a deficit of employment lands of approximately 81 gross hectares. It was determined that the coordinated planning of future employment lands will be essential to achieving balanced and sustainable growth over the long term, recognizing that the population growth that's anticipated. Highway 400 and Forbes Road interchange was identified as being strategic for accommodating long-term employment growth due to its regional accessibility. The servicing analysis demonstrated that the proposed development can be accommodated through, as Antoine mentioned, planned water and wastewater upgrades. There's also no immediate fiscal impacts identified, and the findings from Watson support a phased and strategic approach to the development of employment lands that aligns with infrastructure delivery and long-term financial planning. Next slide, please. So hopefully you're all still with us. And in terms of next steps, we're recommending that if council chooses to endorse these recommendations, the next step would be for the project team to initiate an official plan amendment process and then kick off a formal public engagement exercise. So it would be, you go through an official plan process, you have an engagement strategy, including consultation with a whole host of interested parties. There would be policies drafted, including the phasing that we've talked about. An official plan amendment would be presented to the public, and then there would be coordination with the county, obviously, because of their role. And then existing land uses will continue as they need to, as they're permitted today, until such time that those lands need to evolve. Again, it's important to make sure that there is a transparent process followed to make sure that all existing and future landowners are aware. So again, as I mentioned at the outset, it was a fairly lengthy presentation, but felt it was necessary to cover all aspects of the study given where we are in the process. So with that concludes our presentation. I appreciate your time and I appreciate the support of our project team too, and staff to get us where we are today. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, and thank you very much for the presentation. Before we do move to questions, I'm just going to have the mover and seconder to get this on the floor. I have Councillor Fisher and Councillor Thompson, that the report from the Manager of Planning Services and Senior Planning regarding the Township's Growth Management Study, update and recommendations dated March 18th, 2026 be received, and that the GMS Final Recommendation Report, Servicing Analysis, Growth Forecast, Lands Need Assessment, Financial Impact Analysis, and presentation prepared by WSP and Watson Associates be received, and that council endorse the findings and recommendations of WSP's growth management study and direct staff to initiate the formal planning process to undertake the amendments to the township's official plan to 1, bring the official plan into conformity with the provincial planning statement, 2, extend the township's current planning horizon and growth forecasts, 3, expand the Midhurst secondary area boundary for employment lands at the Forbes and 400 interchange, 4, identify a long-term employment reserve area overlay along the 400 south to Partridge Road. 5, incorporate updated municipal boundary mapping as per Bill 76, and that council authorize staff to engage in the County of Simcoe to initiate any associated county official plan amendments, and that council directs staff to upload the GMS materials to the township's website to initiate the public consultation engagement. And at this time, I can turn to members of council for any comments or questions. Sorry, Deputy Cabral.
Thanks, Mayor Coughlin, and through you to Mr. Bender. Just with respect to the forecasting, and I guess it could be anyone on your team that answers it actually. With respect to the forecasting, things are a little bit slow right now, but the Midhurst secondary plan, the number of units that were proposed for the Midhurst secondary plan, have those all been taken into consideration? Because some of the numbers here looked a little bit light moving forward as far as, population growth was concerned and the number of units that were actually going to be put into place. And I just want to know better if that has been incorporated into the entire process.
Through the chair, and I can start this one, Greg. Yeah, we have obviously considered and looked at that. Part of the challenge here is, again, we're working with that Simcoe County forecast as part of this exercise and embracing that, which is really why we went into that sensitivity analysis to understand, should Midhurst develop at that greater pace, would there be a potential implication around that? And so that's not embedded in the forecast, but again, we wanted to sensitivity test that to make sure the land need was, okay over that longer term horizon. All I would say, generally around this concept is, of course, there's a significant amount of development pressure and potential in Midhurst with that plan. And of course, the timing of that is certainly a big question, right? And whether or not there is that, kind of getting back to that initial point I made, where you can build all these homes, but is there enough people to actually come and migrate and absorb those within the 10-year, 15-year, 25-year, whatever it may be, which is why we looked at that Ministry of Finance outlook for the broader regional area to say, what is that broader potential? And so if you were to build a significant amount more homes, would that actually draw more people into the regional area, or would that become more of a, now, the pie is a similar size, but Springwater's trying to, bite off a larger share of that. So there's a lot of considerations, and we didn't really get into that from a specific forecasting standpoint, but again, wanted to address that at least at a high level through that sensitivity testing.
Follow on?
Thank you, Mayor Coghlan. I know it's a bit a short notice, obviously, but with respect to incorporating the boundary adjustment into it, and that those lands are primarily going to be used for housing, and they basically abut actually are settlement areas, for lack of a better term. Has that been forecasted as well? Because that will obviously impact the amount of development and growth that goes on in Springwater Township with respect to the Midhurst secondary plan. So is there anything there that, you can kind of provide any insight on, maybe timeframes?
Yeah, through the chair. Unfortunately, we did conduct our forecasting analysis before those recommendations were made final, and so we didn't have a chance to reflect that. But with that being said, there still is, regardless of that annexation and those additional lands, there still is that growth potential for Barrie. That was, the growth forecasting. There was that regional exercise done as well, looking at the growth potential across the, the three municipalities, and ultimately, that addition of land doesn't necessarily mean that Barrie's forecast is significantly different. And so because we haven't been able to assess that forecast change to Barrie, what does that mean for their forecast? Does it mean a faster rate of growth, or does it mean that now they have the land to continue to achieve their existing growth forecast, right? When we look at a growth forecast, we typically like to do it from an unconstrained perspective. So, let's say you needed 300 hectares more in Springwater to grow. We would still want to identify that irrespective of that deficit, there's demand to grow here. You just need to get the land sorted out. So again, I haven't assessed that Barrie forecast within that context to understand, does that Barrie work already represent that, right? And so this annexation is merely kind of demonstrating the how that forecast would be achieved, and not necessarily altering the forecast and then the impacts that would have on Springwater.
Councilor Moore?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Coghlan, to the representative from Watson. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. Of particular importance to our residents would be the slides that referenced upward pressure on taxation. So with that, I'm curious to know if you've taken the most recent tax increase that would have just occurred at this last budget, or were you looking still at 2024 rates? I couldn't really tell sort of what last data you were using, because it would make a difference. We had a significant tax increase this year, so I'm wondering if that would have made a big difference for folks.
So through the mayor, we use the 2025 tax rates, and so if they increased roughly, I don't know, what would you say was the percentage increase to 2026?
Oh, I'll refer to the CAO, please, for that.
For your Richard members of council, I believe it was around 5.15 total blended levy. But we can confirm.
Yeah, so through the mayor, I think that's good. So what we saw was an upward pressure on tax rates of about 2% for the growth to 2056 within the urban settlement boundary. And so correct, kind of one of the things I was alluding to is if there was future increases to tax rates, that would mitigate some of that pressure. So that in itself would mitigate the pressure, and then we would see that go from a negative to a slight positive impact on the budget.
Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. More of a statement than a question. I appreciate the fact that you talked about Midhurst Heights and the Forbes Road piece and infrastructure running to them. It is a question within the community. Do we have the existing infrastructure or a place to start? But I think you touched on that very well. Also, the deficit of employment lands. I think that's of concern and definitely plays into taxation as well. So I think it's good to address that. So thank you for the presentation.
Deputy Cabral?
Well, thank you, Mayor Coghlan, through you. Just one more comment with respect to it. It seemed to be focused very heavily on the Midhurst area, the southern portion of Springwater Township. Did you consider any of the employment lands that are already in existence up by the 493 and possibly in any other areas of the township, or did you strictly focus on the south end when you were projecting these jobs and these employment pieces?
Through the mayor, I don't know if Greg, you want to jump in on the land consideration, but when it comes to the forecast itself, we took a citywide or township-wide perspective, and again, built on that scope of 7 work. So we didn't make a big alteration to that 2051 forecast, and so in extending it out an additional 5 years, there wasn't a significant consideration to how one area might affect the township-wide growth. Again, looking at this more from a broader regional perspective and looking at the relationship between jobs and population, which is called the activity rate. So again, in the township right now, quite a skewed activity rate towards residential growth. And so looking at, how, this increase in industrial jobs could, bring that activity rate down and that ratio and that tax rate. But yeah, to answer your question, it's more of a kind of broad township-wide level that we looked at it from a forecast perspective. When it comes to the land needs piece, I apologize, I don't know if you had a secondary question around that, but or the location options piece, sorry.
Before I do go to the follow-on, I do see Mr. Bender here for comment.
Thanks. And through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Cabral, we certainly do look at the entire township, but we're primarily focusing on Midhurst given its importance in the community, its significance in terms of how much growth is going to be directed to the settlement area over time, and its proximity certainly to the highway. I recognize that there are potentially other areas that could be looked at, but this one seemed logical given the potential expansion areas for this particular settlement area.
Not seeing anything further. I just want to say thank you very much for all the work that has gone into this. This is extremely exciting, and thank you to our staff as well. I think that the future of Springwater is looking quite fantastic. So this is looking forward to the next steps and getting public input and continuing on this path. So thank you very much for bringing us to this part. So council, if there's nothing further, all those in favor? And that has carried.
Thank you.
And at this time, we are moving on to question period, and I will turn to Clerk McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor Coghlan. And through you, we have had one submission for question period, which I will read out. As a resident, I have been reviewing the staff report regarding the future of Spruce Grove Park and wanted to share my perspective on the options presented. In my view, option 3 warrants serious consideration as it provides the opportunity to better understand and potentially enhance the long-term value and use of this property before any decision to dispose of it is made. Given the size of the parcel and its highly visible location at a major intersection, I believe it is essential that an independent appraisal be completed to establish a clear understanding of its current and potential value, particularly if rezoning is considered. Further, if council ultimately determines that the property should be sold, I would strongly encourage that it be done through a fully open and public process. A property of this nature should be made available to the broader market so that any interested party has the opportunity to participate, ensuring both fairness and the best possible return for taxpayers. Thank you for your consideration, and that's from Perry Ritchie, 1211 Bloss Road 7 East in Springwater.
Thank you. And at this time, we open for questions from the members of the public. And just your name and address, please.
Good evening, Council. Hale Mahan, 33 Hillview Crescent, Midhurst. I have a question about question period. I watched with great interest and great support the discussion at the last council meeting when it came to the procedural bylaw and the possible amendment to the bylaw, which for anyone who wasn't there would allow for members of the public to come up and ask questions that don't relate to an item that's on the agenda, but to ask any question of interest and that's related to municipal jurisdiction. I wanted to ask a question about if that bylaw amendment will be coming forward and also speak in favor of that amendment if it does come forward. I think there's a strong rationale for it. It seems like in this current sort of political environment that we're in, where there's a lot of very contentious political issues that come forward, that sort of I would say that they stretch across agendas. They don't sort of live on any one agenda, but they exist just in the broader political sphere. It's important, I think, that people have an opportunity to comment on those and ask questions about those. I also think that there's considerations with the chair's discretion. The current bylaw says that the chair has a discretion to allow or disallow questions that don't relate to an item on the agenda. But I think that when the chair of council is involved in the political discussions, it's also important that some of the chair's discretion focuses more on procedural elements as opposed to elements that are more political. It's concerning that it's possible that the chair would make a political determination when it comes to allowing for or not allowing for something to be asked during question period. I know that there's also sort of a rationale for why 8.37 is in there in the first place. I think that it's so that no one person can come up and sort of take control of a council meeting or use the council meeting to, put forward any of their personal interests and that type of thing. But I think that there are some things in the later sections of the bylaw that address that. Number one, there's a section just after 8.37 that talks about having respect and decorum. There are sections that talk about time limits and the number of people that are allowed to come up. And so I think that those things sufficiently protect the integrity of the council meeting. I also think that those things, just having those as elements, as opposed to having the possibility of the chair determining when a specific question can and can't be asked, it returns the chair's discretion to more procedural elements, which I think is where it rests for contentious issues like that. So I wanted to make those comments in support of the bylaw amendment, should it come forward, and I'd encourage everyone to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. And if there's any additional questions this evening? Not seeing any, we'll move on to item 7. May I have a mover and seconder for the council minutes, please? Councillor Alexander, Councillor Garwood, that the minutes of council listed herein be approved as presented. 1 is the minutes of the regular meeting of council for March 4th, 2026. 2, the minutes of the special meeting of council March 4th, 2026. 3, the minutes of special meeting of council closed session March 4th, 2026. 4, the minutes of special meeting of council March 4th, 2026. And 5, the minutes of the special meeting of council closed session of March 4th, 2026. Any questions or comments on these minutes? All those in favor? And that has carried. Mover and seconder for the board and committee, please. Councillor Fisher. And Deputy Corral. That the minutes of the boards, committees, and other organizations listed herein be received for information. The minutes of the Agricultural Advisory Committee of December 2nd, 2026, and minutes of the Elmville District High School Ad Hoc Committee of January 14th, 2026. Any comments or questions on these? All those in favor? That is carried. And for the committee recommendations. Councillor Moore and Councillor Fisher, that the memo from the Agricultural Advisory Committee regarding the farm drainage tour be received as information. Any comments or questions on this? Councillor Fisher? In your microphone, please.
Put forward a motion of support to allow or to fund the drainage tour up to $700, I believe it was they were asking for.
And a seconder for the amendment, Councillor Garwood. So this would just be to receive, sorry, this is the amendment. So on the amendment, any comments or questions on the amendment? All those in favor? That is carried. Any comments on the motion as amended? Councillor Fisher?
Yeah, just a quick note. Drainage in the agricultural community is talked about a lot within the committee, but it's very, very important. The focus for the agricultural committee is to allow an opportunity for those members on council to actually go out into the field and see exactly what they're facing, particularly in the springtime when drainage is an issue. So that's why I support it, and that's why I asked the rest of council. Agriculture is a very large part of our of Springwater and our economy. Even tonight, we can see talking about agricultural lands and its importance. So I hope for everyone's support on this, and I'm sure I'll have it.
Anything further? Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thank you, Councillor Fisher, for bringing this forward. Happy to support it. Can you just clarify the funding source for the $700? Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we could probably take that from the Springwater swing. I think there's enough funding in there, and we've all talked about using it. So,
And I would just defer to staff if there's a more appropriate funding source. Deputy CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I would just recommend it comes from the operating budget. The Springwater swing is generally for community organizations, events of that kind of nature.
Not seeing anything further, so this would be, we do have it noted, the funding source, so that the memo from the Agricultural Advisory Committee regarding a farm drainage tour be received as amended. All those in favor? And that is carried. Moving on now to action reports, item 9.1, a mover and seconder for the Barrie Soccer Club. Councillor Garwood, Councillor Alexander, that the report from the Recreation Parks and Facilities Department dated February 18th, 2026 regarding the Barrie Soccer Club Dome loan guarantee be received, and that council direct staff to work towards an agreement with the Barrie Soccer Club for guaranteeing against a loan financing by a financial institution towards the construction of an indoor turf facility on the Barrie Soccer Club property, and that council direct staff to return with a complete agreement and bylaw to approve the signing of this agreement. I will now turn to members of council for any comments or questions. Councillor Fisher?
I was the one who actually asked to defer this from a previous meeting. I did believe that we should delve a little bit further into it before making a final decision. And, with that, I'm glad we did. I think this is actually a very good facility for our community. I definitely don't want to set precedent in co-signing. It is actually very, I would say, almost unorthodox. So I don't want to set precedent doing this. However, in talks with our staff, I actually believe it's a very good thing to bring to our community, and that the organization itself has been around, I believe, since the 1980s. I'm told, very strong balance sheet. I think it's something I'd like to support in the community. So anyway, you have my endorsement.
I have Deputy Cabral and then Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we've said that. I mean, we did have discussion last time. It was a deferral, but there was a significant discussion about it. And the risks that were associated with it, it's basically a liability on our books type of thing. I'd like to see staff engage a little bit further, but I'd like to see some concrete information come to council, with respect to, what kind of offers have come from the bank, that type of thing. Is financing actually available to them, and have they been approved? I know in the report memo, it speaks to that, they don't require townships assistance in order to move forward. But at the same time, to make me feel more comfortable, I would like to see some of the actual data and information that staff are building their support of this going forward. That would certainly alleviate a lot of my concerns. From a fiscal standpoint, it's still a $6.5 million on our books, and if tomorrow, if we were already into it, if tomorrow, God forbid something happened and there was a default, Springwater Township all of a sudden is on the hook for this funding and possibly running of a park or even completing the construction. So those are my concerns. I'm looking at the way the motion is drafted, and it says, council directs staff to return with a completed agreement and a bylaw to approve the signing of the agreement. I think what I would like to see is a copy of the proposed agreement so that members of council who do have any further questions on what's in that agreement can at least have an opportunity to speak to it. I have my concerns, but my concerns are all from the residents, the kind of questions that I think they would be asking me to look at and asking me to ensure that their best interests were being looked after. I know our finance department has said and lent their support, but at the same time, ultimately, it's the decision of members on council on whether this agreement goes forward. And that's what I would like to see, not simply a completed agreement and a bylaw to approve the signing of the agreement. I think the agreement should come back to council for an opportunity for review and any additions or deletions that members of council might like to see in that agreement, just so that, we feel comfortable. What we've had so far is information that has come from staff, but the information is rather broad, for lack of a better term, and it's not really specific to some of the questions that might be on the minds of members of council. And I guess too, in the report, it also talked about there's this potential for what is being kind of termed as a return to Springwater Township by having exposures on a billboard, I guess, but it's not a real gain for Springwater Township in the sense that most municipalities don't really advertise in that manner. Certainly not who they are as a branding exercise. So, when I take that into consideration, it does give me a little bit more concern about the other end of it, which is Springwater Township, guaranteeing the loan. Basically, we're signing on a mortgage here. And I just want to feel very comfortable and very confident going forward that when I do come to that period in time where a decision has to be made, that I feel very comfortable in making that decision. So that's my concern with the way it's worded here, Mayor Coughlin. And I hope members of council will also see that they have an opportunity here to get more information and review the agreement prior to it going forward. I think it's prudent for us to do that, and we do it with some of the largest agreements that this township makes when it comes to subdivision agreements and what's going on there and the things that are going to be done. So I don't see this as being any different. I think council should have an opportunity to review a draft agreement prior to it coming back to council for any type of approval. Thank you.
Yeah, I will turn to Deputy CAO. And I think that the one word completed agreement could just be removed from the recommendation, and then it would just be that return with the agreement, so that it's not like the intention is for council to have eyes on it again. This is just an endorsement to say that we are fully that maybe members of council could be fully supportive of this, and we want to take it to the next step, which is council having the opportunity to review the agreement. Deputy CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. That's exactly what I was going to mention. The intent is that the agreement come back to council for review, consideration, amendment, and further consideration.
Follow on, and I would just request that. the
Very
word-
quick, very quick. Thank
And
you. I
I-
appreciate that.
And thank you. I would request that the word completed be struck from the recommendation. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mayor Cog. I just,
Deputy Cabral.
thank you. I thought you gave me the go ahead, so I won't. Anyway, thank you very much, CEO, Deputy CEO Rainsworth. When I look at them at the agendas, or I see any motions, anything like that, the way they're written is the way I interpret them. So I do appreciate that, because what I now am seeing here is a draft agreement that's coming back before council for our review. So thank you.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thank you to the Barrie Soccer Club folks for being here tonight, and for answering all of our questions that we've had. I am glad that we deferred this item. I think it did give everyone an opportunity to think about it a bit further. I'm going to be honest, I've been on the fence on this one, but where I'm leaning now is many of my questions have been focused on what is the guarantee to the community and what is the benefit to the community. So something from the memo that staff provided that was on the agenda that I want to read out loud was, the question was, what community benefits are included in the loan guarantee agreement in recognition of the township's partnership as a guarantor? And the answer was, the loan guarantee agreement shall include a provision whereby the Barrie Soccer Club agrees to use reasonable and practical efforts to prioritize township requested community access and to accommodate township-led programming at the facility. So again, not to be nitpicking specifically here, but I think reasonable and practical. I see this as we are a significant partner. Yes, we might not be physically putting out the upfront investment, and that is the folks of the Barrie Soccer Club's responsibility. As the deputy mayor noted, should there be any issue down the road, it is on the taxpayer to cover that cost. So I'd like to see us be considered more as a partner and treated like one. Again, after all, it is the taxpayer that is taking a risk here by providing this guarantee. So as it stands right now, I'm happy to provide to support the recommendation forward and hope to see this move forward. Thank you.
I have Councillor Fisher and Councillor Moore.
Thank you. It's always been my understanding that it would come back to us for final. So that was certainly my understanding. I do believe it is prudent that we go over it just as we would a subdivision agreement. The more I've looked at it, much like Councillor Garwood, I've been on the fence on this, struggled with it. At one point, thought I wouldn't support it. Now, yes, I am in favor of it. I think the facility is a huge gain, particularly in terms of sports and recreation within the municipality, particularly if we're seen as a bigger partner within it. I do look at the downside with it. It's actually it's no outlay of money. You're really asking for our co-signing on it. There is liability, yes, but I also look at the downside. If something were to go wrong, what would be our recourse? And I have talked with staff about that as well. When I weigh out the gains for the liability, I actually see it as a potential huge win for us. I also believe that being located where it is in a high growth center beside the city of Barrie, I think there is a lot of upside there. I think it brings a lot of people in, particularly with growth along the Bayfield Street corridor. I know this is a bit unrelated, but that does become a bit of an economic driver or an economic pull for us into the future. So, I look forward to having it come back to us and see what we can do with it. So.
Councillor Moore.
No, thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thank you so much for being here. It's been a long road getting here, but I appreciate your patience. I'm excited for you because I do believe this will move forward, and I'm hoping that you will be able to start construction this spring, which I'm sure you're excited for. I'm going to support this for a few reasons. First, because you are in a strong financial position, and you've demonstrated that. I really appreciate the idea and your foresight in having a shared use with your facilities. So as the report says, you have opportunity to work with our sports and day camps, fitness, potentially drop-in soccer programming. There's other organizations that you've been in touch with and are working on agreements. I'm really hoping that you'll be able to pay off your loan much sooner. And I have all the confidence in the world. So I will support this. I agree that we should see the agreement though before we sign off 100%, but encourage staff to move forward and for yourselves to move forward, and look forward to seeing it when it's complete.
I have Councillor Alexander and Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thank you to the Barrie Soccer Club. And thank you to staff for indulging us and coming back. And then I do agree that obviously we would want to see the contract again. I do think this is definitely something I could support. The ask I would have, and doesn't need to be official, but or contractual, is when we're talking about kind of the shared use space and the ideas that come from that, I would ask staff to put a bit of thought into that and what the cost is going to be to the township as well. Because what we saw with the EDHS agreement was it was put forward and it was supposed to happen, and then it was a long struggle to get it to happen, and not just because of COVID, but because I don't think the agreement had been maybe nailed down as much as it needed to be in terms of how much it was going to, additional staff members. There's a lot of other moving pieces that didn't come to us till after the fact. So I would just encourage staff to kind of start to think through that preemptively. So we're not in the spot where the building's built and we're trying to use it, and all of a sudden we haven't had enough forethought into that. So.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And I don't want you to think that I'm detracted from this. I think soccer is a great sport and everybody can get into it. And that's the part I like about it the best. It's not a heavy equipment type of thing. But I do also have one other concern that I'm hoping staff might be able to take into consideration, and maybe give some consideration as to how we're going to deal with this going forward, because this is going to be somewhat precedent setting. And, I think back to outside of Phelpston, not too long ago, there was a baseball training center that was coming up, and there were a few asks that had come out of that. And, they didn't materialize. We'll just leave it at that. And then when things, didn't progress the way they could have, there was an opportunity for township at that point in time. So I guess my question would be that if council supports this going forward, is can staff try and see whether or not there's some type of a policy projection that we might be able to look at that can guide us down the future? Because at some point in time, we may have another, someone decides they're going to build a swimming pool and, they want to make it available to us and they're doing lessons. How do we turn around and say, well, you're going to give us use of your pool with lifeguards? How are we going to manage that is what I'm saying, I guess. So I would appreciate it if staff might have an opportunity to take that in consideration, see maybe what some other municipalities have done that have engaged in this type of a partnership, just so that when it comes down the road, we have basically a bit of a plan on how to deal with it and not necessarily have to just say yes because we've set a precedent, or say no and make it look like we're in favor of one sport over another type of thing. Is that something that we might be able to consider going forward, I hope?
Thank you. Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just to add on that, maybe to speak to some of the benefits here, just speaking to what Councillor Alexander was noting around the EDHS facility in Elmvale, it's a perfect example of a great partnership between the school board and between the municipality, and how we have, while it's taken years, we've now activated a space that we don't own, that our taxpayers do not have to significantly upfront the construction cost to. And they are getting 3 days of use out of it per week. We are able to program it. We are able to staff it. And I think this council has done a great job at moving that initiative forward. And now we can use this as a great example to say, hey, we've done it once before. We've made a partnership before. We can do it again. We've learned maybe where some of those gaps are, and maybe how that upfront plan needs to be thought out a bit further into the future. But I also think of other initiatives, while they are very different in focus, that the municipality has either financially supported through loans or whatnot. I think of the Elmvale Food Bank and I think of the Curling Club. While those aren't initiatives of this term of council, they're initiatives that made a remarkable and significant difference to our entire municipality, not just the Elmvale community. So while it's not the same thing, I do see similarities. So I'm happy we were able to talk this through, because a month ago I might have had a different tune. So I appreciate it.
Yes, all right. Thank you very much for the diligence that has gone on gone into this from council, staff, and the soon-to-be Barrie Springwater Soccer Club. Thank you very much for this. I think that this provides an incredible opportunity for our residents of all ages and multiple sports, not just soccer, but also it keeps our residents local. There's not a lot of turf out there, and I can imagine how frustrating a 2-hour drive for a practice would be. So thank you very much for bringing this forward, and I look forward to supporting it again when the agreement comes forward. Not seeing anything further, council, all those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you very much. At this time, we will take a break in 10, yes. Take a break, 10 minutes, guys. We'll be back in 10.
Congratulations.
All right, council and staff, we'll move on now to our action items. Item 10.1, Spruce Grove Park. May I have a mover and seconder for this, please? I have Councillor Fisher and Thompson. That the report from the Recreation Parks and Facility Department regarding Spruce Grove Park dated March 18th, 2026 be received, and that council declare the lands known as Spruce Grove Park to be surplus to the need of the township, and that council hereby deem the lands as viable in accordance with the Sale and Disposition Land Policy Act. Option 1, which is staff recommended, that council directs staff to initiate discussions with the adjacent property owner regarding the potential purchase of the lands as direct sale negotiation, including the required boundary adjustments and closure of the adjacent road allowance, subject to the township's sale disposition of land policy and confirmation of the title status begin with legal counsel. That council provides direction that should the negotiations with the adjacent property owner not result in a mutually agreeable term with a reasonable time frame, staff will proceed to option 2. Option 2, that council directs staff to undertake the necessary steps to rationalize the property boundaries and close adjacent road allowance, following which the lands will be offered for sale in accordance with the township's sale disposition of land policy. Option 3, that council direct staff to initiate the necessary planning processes, including any required official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to establish an appropriate future land use designation for the property prior to offering the lands for sale in accordance with the township surplus land policy. And at this time, I can turn to members of council for any comments or questions. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I appreciate that. And I've looked over it and I did a bit of research myself, and I also did reach out to staff as well. I think my concern here is, we're kind of looking at this through a recreational lens. And I'm actually would like to propose option 3. And the reason for that is option 1 proposes a direct sale to the adjacent owner, which is typically appropriate for lands that are landlocked, too small, or otherwise not developable on their own. And that's not the case that we have here. I also want to step back for a moment and recognize how we got here. The property came to council's attention due to misuse, garbage, undesirable activity, and related concerns. And that issue, because the park is now closed and we're going to seal it up and not open it, through the closure of the park, that piece has been dealt with. So this is no longer an operational problem that requires an immediate solution. There's no urgency to sell the property, and it can remain in the township's inventory while we take the time to make a more informed decision. I also want to speak to the value more directly. Today, this property is constrained by its current designation, which limits what can be used for, and as a result, limits its market value. However, given its size, location at a high traffic intersection, and the anticipated increase in traffic with future infrastructure improvements, I think it's reasonable to expect that its value could change significantly if the land at some point in time were able to be rezoned to a more appropriate use. In other words, there's a clear difference between what this property is worth today under the current zoning and what it could be worth if it were first determined that there might be a higher and better use through proper planning process. Option 3 gives the opportunity to do exactly that. It allows us to rely on our own professional planning staff to assess appropriate future land uses, evaluate the rezoning potential, and help determine how that property can achieve its maximum value and function. Taking that step is not only speculative, it's a prudent and relatively cost-effective way to ensure that council's making a full informed decision about a public asset. At a minimum, I believe the appraisal should be undertaken that considers both the current value and the potential value under different land use scenarios. Without that, we're making a decision without fully understanding the asset. And if council ultimately decides to sell, I think it is essential that this be done through a fully open and transparent public process so that any interested party has the opportunity to participate. That's how we ensure fairness, transparency, and the best outcome for taxpayers. At its core, this is about stewardship. We have a viable, publicly owned parcel in a strategic location, and we should take the time to understand its full value before making a permanent decision. For those reasons, I will be supporting option 3, and that's what I'd like to see at least voted on or discussed a bit. What I guess that boils down to is we don't sell first and then ask questions later. Option 3 lets us understand the value before we dispose of the asset. This is a valuable standalone parcel, not a leftover, and it deserves fair, open process, not a direct sale. So those are my comments. I have several more with respect to why I believe that that property should remain in inventory until staff had an ample opportunity. We just had WSP here looking at what we can do and for employment lands and the future of Springwater and how we're going to be developing. County's also dealing with Scopa 7. These are two major regional roads. And I can just envision down the road, and maybe it would be 20 years, maybe it would be 15, maybe it would be 10, where things may start to happen along certain stretches of some of our regional roadways that, you know, are going to develop, and we're not going to be able to prevent that. We're looking at a 2056 horizon, and I'm just saying that I don't think there's any urgency to sell this parcel of land, and I think option 3 will provide council with the full informative opportunity to decide what to do with it. You know, we look at orphan pieces of land like the one that was up on Spence in Midhurst. I mean, and that's what you call an orphan piece, or a piece that really has no potential to be sold to anybody else because you can't build anything on it. It's too small. It's landlocked for whatever reason. That one there we sold. And the reason we sold it is because really it only made sense to sell it to one individual property owner. And I don't believe that that's the case that we have here. And I'll be transparent. I did receive a telephone call specific to this particular item. And, you know, did have a very good conversation about the problems that had existed there and how we'd, as a council, decided that we were going to bring them to a stop. And, you know, did indicate to the gentleman who was asking me to support option 1 that I would be more interested in supporting option 2 because it's a public piece of property. And I believe that as a municipality and as a council, we have an obligation to the public to make sure that we get the top value for any piece of property that we have that we're considering selling. And the only way to do that properly, I believe, is through option 3. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And before I turn to other members of council, the property that we're speaking to, was it identified in the original land needs study or the surplus land inventory? Thank you. Other members of council? Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. I have I spent the last few days poring over this and we've gone back and forth. I'll sort of play devil's advocate. You know, I don't mind getting a present and future value for the land. I think that may be prudent. The more I take a look at the piece of land, it may have future value 15 or 20 years down the road, maybe, quite possibly. However, we as a township will end up sort of policing that land, looking at the garbage. I too have spoke with an adjacent homeowner, farmer. You know, people using it for, I think it's been described as nefarious activities before, but it is true. So we will bear that responsibility until it is sold in the future. So I've always been, and many of us have on council, been a proponent of surplus lands being sold off. We don't want the liability. If we can gain something from selling it off, I'm always in favor of it. When I take a look at the land itself, to the deputy mayor's point, some of these pieces of land are orphan pieces of land. They're not really worth anything except to the people beside it. This one fits somewhere in the middle. In truth, it's roughly 3 acres of land. But I do believe that, and it's said right here, if the property owner, if it's not mutually agreeable, the terms, that we would be able to proceed with selling it to somebody else or doing something else with it. I have, like the deputy mayor, I have spoken to a person who showed some level of interest, at least in what's going on with the property. He has expressed interest in owning it as well. I don't mind offering it up to particularly a farmer who's in the area and would like to preserve it. So just to play devil's advocate with it, I don't mind getting an evaluation before we do enter maybe a negotiation with those individuals, two different people. As I also understand it, one of the individuals is actually using a road allowance right now. So I know that they'd like to rectify that as well. So just to throw that on the table, food for thought. So.
Councillor Garwood, Councillor Thompson, Deputy.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just to add on to what Councillor Fisher said, so I am, first I'll clarify, I am not in favor of option number 3. I believe option number 1 is the most suitable path forward. I think we need to first take a step back as to what the purpose of that land is today. We know that it's considered a township park, right? We know that. But we also know, due to the information that's been provided back by our Parks, Recreation and Facilities team, that there is little to no recreational benefit to Springwater residents regarding this piece of land. At the end of the day, we absolutely might be able to make more money on that land down the road in the future, but I also am a believer that it is my preference to see an adjacent landowner utilize that space for agricultural properties, whatever that purpose may be, whether it's to physically farm land. Again, I don't know what the zoning is specifically, whether it is to park farm machinery or whether it just sits vacant and it is a part of that parcel. Regardless, I would rather see that than a gas station or its importance, which we also know from the size of that chunk of land is not suitable for those type of developments regardless. It is a very strange shape parcel. We also know from the report that staff provided that option number 1 is the lowest administrative cost and complexity, resolves boundary irregularities and efficiencies, minimizes liability and operational burden, and provides certainty regarding the outcome. Again, the outcome is that we provide this as an option for the adjacent landowner. And should an agreement not be reached, this doesn't mean that we're just clicking, putting a check mark beside it and saying, there you go. It still has to come back to council. We still have to have that negotiation and we still have to come to an agreement. During that process, as there would for any sale, there would be a appraisal of that parcel of land regardless, and then council can make that decision. But I would first like to see option 1 be that opportunity. Comparative to option number 3, which is what the deputy mayor has recommended, we know that it also is the most costly and time-consuming option. It requires Planning Act processes and approvals, and it may not be warranted given the limited development potential of the site. I'm also a believer that we should not be sitting here changing the zoning of that land for sale. If somebody wants to put something on that piece of land, they can purchase it. They can go through that process. They can burden that expense on themselves, and they can come to council and or the committee of adjustment to get the appropriate approvals to move forward, should that be their desired plan. So I will not support option number 3 respectfully. I do believe option number 1 is the best feasibility, understanding that it also sounds like that is what staff are declaring is the best option.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So through the chair to Director Culver and your team, thank you very much for the work you've done on this. You've done a great job, and thank you for being attentive and bringing this back. Could you just share with us, maybe with the help of planning, just as to why that this is your staff why you're recommending this option to us?
Director Culver.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak to the recreational value and then I'll ask planning to weigh in on the planning principles. Our assessment, just as stated in the report, was that due to its proximity to populations, to the nature of the property, to its adjacency to busy roads, it didn't have what we would describe as high recreational value, which is where our part of the report sort of came in. However, I'll defer to planning for comments on what the developable potential of the land is.
Sorry, through the chair to members of council. So from a planning perspective, the property is zoned open space, also designated in our official plan as open space. So permitted uses today are pretty limited to recreational uses and agricultural uses. In the county official plan, it's designated agriculture. So if we were to undertake an official plan or zoning bylaw process, we would still need to conform to the county OP of an agricultural designation. So pretty limited in terms of permitted uses there. We're also looking at a property that's outside of a settlement area and not on municipal services, also limiting your development potential. And I do note that there are implications with the adjacent properties in terms of accesses and boundaries, which is, I think, why the boundary adjustment option is on there to kind of clean that up and clean up the accesses for the adjoining neighbors.
Follow on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And I too, I think I could support option number one. I think certainly to Deputy Mayor Cabral's point of view is I agree with him. We've got responsibility to get the most for this land, but I see this as the path forward of doing that, disposing of it the quickest. Should we approve option number one tonight, could you give us some kind of a time frame as to how this process would go forward?
Deputy CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. With any of the options, there are provisions that need to be followed in the sale of surplus lands policy. Every step of the way is controlled and to the decision of council and discretion of council. The first step would be to seek an appraisal and title search of the lands. It is a bit more of a complicated property just because of the road allowances and some historical pieces there. So that would be step one. The valuation could incorporate current zoning as well as potential future zoning so that council has a full spectrum view of what the potential value could be. In previous experience, an appraisal could take 2 to 3 months. Land or title searches would fit within that approximate timeline. At that point, staff would return to council in closed session based on to provide council with the values prior to any movement forward on the file. Council could then make a determination whether they wanted to, what value they would like to set and direct staff to further negotiate with the abutting landowners, or option 2 or 3 to further direct how the lands would be disposed of. In totality, something of this nature could take up to 9-12 months, depending on the complexities of the title and the option that council selects. But council is in control of every step of the process.
Following.
Thank you very much. And again, I would be supportive of option number one. Just as an aside, there was an attempt to close the park that was pretty unsuccessful. My understanding was that the plan was to have concrete barriers there. So regardless of which option that we choose, can we actually go forward and permanent, because spring is coming and we're going to get those people squatting in there again, and it's going to be a problem for us. So can that be looked after? Thank you.
Director Culver.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we're aware that the temporary measures were unsuccessful at times. So there is an order in for concrete barriers, and they'll be installed as soon as possible.
I have Councillor Fisher and Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. No, the more I look at it, the more I see option number one is something I'd be in favor of. A few things that were mentioned. It is the lowest cost, lack of infrastructure in the area, limited uses, also cleaning up accesses. I think the more I look at it, it may seem as the easy way out, but I also worry this, if we were to take on option 3, are we going to be driving past it in 10 years, wondering why we didn't take this option? I also, in talking to the residents in the area, growth will happen, and it's certainly happening in Midhurst. We heard this tonight. A gas station isn't exactly probably warranted or wanted by the residents out there. Also, talking to that particular farmer and some of the, the trials and tribulations that him and his family go through out there, I tend to lean to option one when I weigh it out. So I would be in support of option one.
And my apologies to Councillor Alexander. I did skip over Deputy Cabral, so I'll go back to him and then back to you.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And while I appreciate what I'm hearing here, and maybe there's some reluctance with option three, I think the problem with option one is what I'm really hearing is we want to sell this land to one particular person. And I think that from my perspective, that's not what this council should be doing with a parcel that's 3 acres in size. The entire process that Deputy CAO Ainsworth just described is the process that I'm happy to go through. The part that I struggle with is this isn't an orphan piece of property. This is a piece of property that I think everybody in Springwater Township should have the opportunity to purchase if the township decides that it's going to sell it. That's what I'm interested in doing. And I feel that what I'm hearing here is that we can only sell this piece of property to one particular individual. And I simply don't agree with that. This is not a piece of property that has to go to one particular individual. This is a piece of property that's 3 acres in size. It has almost 400 feet of frontage on Horseshoe Valley Road. Yes, it's an irregular shape, but it's 3 acres in size. The irregularity of its shape shouldn't really make any difference. But I think what we're really doing here is it's about equal opportunity and transparency. And I think what we're really doing here is excluding every other resident from Springwater Township to have an opportunity to buy this piece of property. And that's what we're really doing here is we are excluding members of Springwater Township from having the opportunity to buy this property. Happy to go through the exact process that Deputy CAO Ainsworth just described. What I'm not prepared to do with respect to option number one, and if we can strike out that it goes to the neighbor or it goes to a sole person, then I could support option one. Let's go through the process, find out about selling it, and then dispose of it the same way our property disposal policy dictates. Because when you look at that policy and you look at how you're supposed to dispose of property, a 3 acre parcel, I'm sorry, but it does not fit that category where you give it or only sell it to one particular individual. So, I would propose an amendment then to option number one, where it is not going to a specific neighboring adjacent property, but that it simply is disposed of according to our township property disposal bylaw. I'm sorry, but what I'm hearing here is that we need to give it to one particular individual. And I'm sorry, I think everybody in Springwater Township has an opportunity to buy that piece of property if this township is selling it.
Thank you, and apologies again to Councillor Alexander. I just want to turn to Deputy CAO before we do that. It was suggested that this is outside of the township policy. If you could just speak to that from.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. The policy does provide council in its sole discretion by resolution to dispose of the surplus lands by any of the following methods. So direct sale or negotiation, request for tender, listing with a real estate agent or broker, or land exchange. So it's at council's purview how they wish to dispose, whether lands are deemed viable or non-viable. That is at council's discretion how they dispose of the lands.
Councillor Alexander?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So I've gone back and forth on this one.
And there's nothing on the floor at this time, and Councillor Alexander does have the microphone.
Okay, so sorry. Again, I've gone back and forth on this one. I think the pieces that stick with me the most for option 3, I'm not comfortable with us rezoning a piece of property we're going to sell. I don't think that's our place, not to try and get more money from it. I think, I can't remember if it was which person up here spoke to it, but I think it's whoever buys the property. That's their right to do that. But I don't think we should be doing that in order to try and turn it into commercial when maybe, or industrial, and that's not, the end goal. And my other piece with this one is, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to staff, but we aren't real estate agents. We don't have real estate agents on staff. That is not our area of expertise. So I'm not sure we need to be trying to look at this from that perspective. I think it's a surplus piece of land and we need to figure out the best way to get rid of it, to be perfectly honest. So I am open to whatever kind of we decide at this table, but I do have concerns with option 3 the more I look into it.
So I do have Councillor Moore, Deputy Cabral. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just a quick question for planning. If this property was then to be purchased by the adjacent landowner, does the title merge? So do we have a merge on title when that happens, plus a restriction on rezoning? So therefore, they wouldn't be able to parcel off that piece of property down the road or rezone it?
I'll turn to our managers.
Through the chair to Councillor Moore. I think that depends. So there's a couple different configurations that could come out of this because there's 2 neighbors that technically are currently accessing over this property. So depending on which property you're talking about, the rural residential one or the farmland, either would be through committee of adjustment, and how that's finalized through the certificate of consent on title, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we'd have to come back with some more information on that. The land titles, and I know there's been some recent changes to the Land Titles Act.
Thank you so much. It's really important, I think, as we move forward to know whether or not there is a formal restriction placed on that piece of property if it's merged, because quite often that happens as titles or properties are purchased by the same landowner. So I am interested in finding that out. As far as the rest of the conversation goes, I think that I'm not against the property owner next door, or in this case, we would be asking 2 property owners. Is that what I'm understanding? That if either one would be interested in purchasing? Okay, that's fine. Again, though, there is a caveat for me that there is not an opportunity to rezone down the road.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I will be proposing an amendment. However, listening to what's going on here, I think maybe a solution could be that, and I know this is possible, is what they call a boundary adjustment within that, where literally you merge that property into whoever it is who's adjacent to its property and maintain the zoning of the original property. So if it's A1 agricultural, then that property then becomes A1 agricultural. But it becomes part and parcel to the original farm piece of property that bought it. So what I'm suggesting is it should be a boundary adjustment possibly be considered as opposed to selling it as a separate piece of property. Very much along the lines of a farm consolidation piece. They occasionally do it with that too. So that's a thought for me, but my amendment would be that this piece of property follow the process for property dispersal, but that it be made available by public tender or through a real estate agent. Once again, I'm just saying that I would like to see it, if it's going to be sold, be made available to anybody who wants to purchase it. So that's the amendment. I don't know how that can be phrased in there, but option 1 works if you can change it up to read along those lines.
Thank you. And before I do go to Councillor Thompson, in the staff recommendation, option 1, it said including the required boundary adjustments. So that is already in there. So I don't know how we could have an amendment to something that's already written in there.
Mayor Coughlin.
Councillor Thompson. And before I do go to having someone move the option, I will return to Deputy Cabral. So you have proposed an amendment, and I would just need clarification on what the amendment is.
Basically, option 1, the process of parting with the land, but that it be offered for public tender, not specifically to an adjacent landowner, because you're restricting the sale of that property at that point. So option 1 is basically what option 1 is. We're going to dispose of that piece of property and follow the policy that township has in place for dealing with surplus lands. but through public tender, not to an adjacent landowner specifically. They'd be more than welcome to bid on it as well.
And for clarification, the statement earlier made was that this would not become a new parcel, that it would be part of a boundary adjustment. So if we're going to have a boundary adjustment, that would only be available to the properties that actually but the property, which is two property owners. So if the goal is to have it be a boundary adjustment, there's really only two interested parties. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. That was based on the premise, if council determines that it's going to go that way, that would be a suggestion that I would suggest happen to the property would be through a boundary adjustment, so it's absorbed by the existing adjacent landowners' lands. However, the amendment I'm putting forward for option 1 is basically sell the surplus land per our surplus land disposal policy through either a real estate, the same process that Deputy CAO Ainsworth made, that we were going to ultimately get to the point of parting with that land, but that it be made available publicly to anybody who wants to purchase it.
Deputy CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Based on those comments, the deputy mayor, I believe, would be looking at option 2. The comment within option 2 for staff to undertake the necessary steps to rationalize the property boundaries and close the adjacent road allowance. That simply just means that staff would ensure with legal that any outstanding road allowances and whatnot would be cleaned up to prepare the property for sale. That option would be a public sale, which would be determined by council at the next steps on whether they would like to go for a request for tender or a real estate agent for sale on public sale. The first step to option 2 would be for staff to clean up title, provide evaluation, come back to council in closed session. Based on that, council can decide on a request for tender with a minimum required bid or a real estate agent and appoint a real estate agent. So based on that, Deputy Mayor Cabral, I believe you're looking at option 2.
Thank you. And before I do go to Councillor Fisher and Councillor Garwood, I just make my own statement. This process to me is not unfamiliar. We have done this numerous times, a lot of times in Orr Lake where we're moving some boundaries. And yes, this property is larger, but it is recommended. And I think that our staff have done a great job in explaining as to why this property would be best suited for a boundary adjustment in conformity with the county LP. Lots of examples. So to me, I think that if there was potential, I believe this was purchased in amalgamation and it was going to be a potential works yard because it was central, and we decided to go with a north and a south instead. So to me, this land provides no value to the residents of Springwater Township. So I would like to see it disposed of, and I think that option number 1 is the most advantageous for us. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, when I hear things like cleaning up accesses, I worry too, if we were to sell it to somebody else, are we just having that problem again? Are we just exacerbating it? Also too, it's zoned agricultural. It's surrounded by farms. I just see that who else would really want this land? And again, with the lower cost of doing it this way, again, I've struggled with it, but this one is emerging at the top, and I would support number 1. So.
Councillor Thompson?
Can I
Yeah.
put option number 1 on
Yes,
the floor?
someone can.
Mayor Coughlin? All right.
Thank you. And a seconder for option 1, please. I have Councillor Garwood. Is there any further comment? Option 1 has been moved and seconded.
Recorded vote, please.
Clerk McDonald?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and through you, a recorded vote has been requested. Councillor Garwood,
Yes.
Councillor Alexander,
Yes.
Councillor Thompson,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Fisher,
Yes.
Deputy Cabral,
No.
and Mayor Coughlin.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now moving on to item 11.1. May I have a mover and seconder for the action reports, please? I have Councilors Fisher and Moore that action report items 11.2 through 11.7 be received and that the recommendations contained therein be approved as presented. 11.2 is the award of the Community Hall's Health Services roof repair. 11.3 is award of RFP 2026-07 FES replacement of tanker 45. 11.4 is the securities reduction request for Stone Manor Wood subdivision. 11.5 is the Cameron Estates Phase 3, 1200 Seaton Road. 11.6 is to authorization of the to execute the amended agreement of 55 Gibb. And 11.7 is the mandatory septic reinspection program. Before we go to that, I would like to apologize. I typically would be able to pick out who in the audience and move things up so you can go home sooner. So I just realized, so I apologize that we didn't do that. And yes. So are there any of these that need to be pulled for redirection? Councillor Moore.
Thank you. 11.7.
Anything further on any of these? Councillor Fisher?
It's 11.2.
Councillor Garwood?
And just comment on 11.2.
Anything for 11.3, 4, 5, or 6? Not seeing any. So at council, we are now voting on 11.3, 4, 5, and 6. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move back to, sorry, excuse me, 11.2 and a mover and seconder for this, please. Councillor Fisher, Councillor Moore. Returning to Councillor Fisher.
Actually, if Mr. Garwood wants to speak first, it is his ward. So.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I wasn't going to pull it for redirection. I was just going to pull it to comment. Understanding that the Anvil Community Hall roof was identified in the 2022 building condition assessment as being in poor condition and requires immediate replacement. Again, that was a few years ago. For anyone that utilizes the space, especially in the health services side of things, there is many active roof leaks and overall deterioration of the building has been observed. These deficiencies have significantly negatively impacted the Springwater Health Services Center and the community hall space, creating operational and facility preservation concerns. As we know, the health services space, while we don't have a physician operating in there full time, we know it is ready to go should that become a reality in the near future. We also have the South Georgian Bay Community Health Team in there on Wednesdays and Life Labs in there on Tuesdays and Thursdays with their newly expanded hours now being up to 8 hours a week. So we know the space does have water issues. It has been very evident for years. In conversations with both of those partners, they have continued to advocate for us to do something about the leaks around not only the roof, but also around the windows as well. Staff have done an absolutely excellent job at prioritizing interim repairs, but from the conversations that I've had with Director Culver and his facilities team, I believe we've exhausted those efforts now. So yes, it is a significant investment in the space, but it is something that is well utilized. It's one of our most utilized municipal facilities in the township. And it's our only municipal healthcare space as well. And it's in significant need of some enhancement.
Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. Yeah, when I saw this, I immediately was a bit shocked, right? The overall price tag, but I did reach out to Director Culver, and essentially along the same lines as Mr. Garwood's sentiments. This is sort of the result of many years of patching and getting it to, suffice for the time being. But it's certainly warranted. I know that some people actually called me about it and said, "Are we really putting that much money into the facility?" And I said, actually, after my discussions, it's very much warranted. It's a lot like putting money into your car. Eventually you really need to put some real money into it, and it's certainly a warranted amount to do it. Also, to lose that facility, I think, would be of detriment to the community. So
Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and thank you, Councillor Fisher, for the support and for those sentiments. You're completely correct, and I think it opens up a much larger conversation as well when we look at many of our municipal facilities. This is not a new conversation that we've had around this table. I think of library roofs. I think of, this space. We've invested millions of dollars in municipal facilities. Grenfell had a significant renovation a year and a half ago. We know that a lot of these buildings are at the age or coming of the age that require significant taxpayer investment. And while it is a lot of money up front, we know what these buildings mean to the community. Obviously, I can only speak to what I see, and what I see is a very active Elmville community that loves that community hall. We know we have a healthcare space that is prime and ready to go, and could also use some further enhancement and upgrades. Unfortunately, it seems as if every year we're having to put money into roofs and foundations, and it's not the fun things that the residents see. It's not the things that people get excited about, new floors and new renovations, but it is the necessities. If we want a building like the Elmville Community Hall to stand there for another 100, we got to spend a couple hundred. So hopefully council will be fully supportive of this initiative.
Not seeing any more hands. I do have this moved by Councillor Fisher and seconded by Councillor Moore that the report from the Manager of Parks and Facilities Title Award for the Elmville Community Hall Health Services Center roof dated March 18th, 2026 be received, and that the contract for the Elmville Community Hall Springwater Health Services Center roof replacement be awarded to Sinclair Industrial Roofing in the amount of $320,946. Then that a 10% contingency in the amount of $32,094 be included for unforeseen circumstances, and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to execute the resulting agreement. Anything further? All those in favor? And that has carried. And now a mover and seconder for 11-7, Councillor Moore and Councillor Garwood. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I happened to see the CBO or Stratton in the audience, so I thought I would harass him a little bit. Just joking. I saw the mandatory septic reinspection program on the agenda, and curious, and I know you'll reach out 129 properties this year. That's going to keep you busy. What were the successes and challenges, and how are you finding the reception when folks find out that their septics are needing to be reinspected?
So this is our third time running the program through you, the Mayor, to Councillor Moore. We haven't had any issues with this program in the past. It's generally very well received. Ultimately, we're protecting the water for all the municipal well residents, so it's a benefit to the community. I don't know what else I can tell you.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you. I would just reiterate that it's also free.
Yes, so in our program, we're going to do the first inspection free, as well as one follow-up. And if you haven't done what you're supposed to by then we'll charge you on the third one.
Thank you. Thank you for the update.
Not seeing anything further. I have this moved by Councillor moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Garwood, that the report from CBO regarding 2026 mandatory septic reinspection program dated March 18th, 2026 be received, and that the mandatory septic reinspection program bylaw be presented at the March 18th regular meeting of council for consideration and approval. All those in favor? And that has carried. We're now moving on to item 12, which is our information reports. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Deputy Cabral, Councillor Alexander, that the report items listed herein be received as information. One is our Building Services Monthly Update, February 2026, Bylaw Services Monthly Update, February 2026, 2026 Municipal School Board Elections. Number 4 is the Zoning Bylaw Amendment to ZB 2026-002 BMR Pro 121 Yonge Street. Number 5 is 1897 Nursery Road redevelopments. 6 is the update regarding the Floss Agricultural Society collaboration for the Ontario Trillium Fund application. 7 is the fire station update. 8 is the extension for the street sweeping. 9 is the water conservation initiatives. 10 is the 2025 Water Systems Annual Summary Report. 11 is the corporate credit card for January 26. 12 is the February 2026 check register. 13 is the 2025 Statement of Council and Board Remuneration and Expenses, and 14 is 2025 Statement of Discretionary Funds. At this time, I will turn to council to have any that need to be pulled for redirection. Any comments on any? Councillor Garwood?
Item 6 and item 9, just both comment.
Anything further, council? Comments, Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Item number 6 is the update regarding the Floss Agricultural Society collaboration and Ontario Trillium Fund application. So I do just wanted to speak to my thanks to staff for their efforts on this initiative, understanding that the Floss Agricultural Society has submitted an application to the Ontario Trillium Foundation capital grant supported by the township. And of course, the initiative would be to be able to invest into recreation in our community and be able to activate the space better for the community. So I wanted to thank staff for those initiatives and working collaboratively with the Floss Agricultural Society. And then the second item, which was item number 9, which was the water conservation initiatives. This came forth, I believe, from direction from Councillor Moore, and I was happy to second that initiative. So in 2025, Council did direct staff to develop a comprehensive public education campaign and communication strategy in response to community impacts from water bans and gathered feedback from resident information sessions. So I did want to thank staff for those efforts. There's a lot of really great suggestions listed in there. And wanted to thank Councillor Moore for bringing that forward as well. But I also wanted to actually dovetail something that that fits timely, which was about a month ago, the report that I brought forward, or the notice of motion, apologies, that I brought forward to look into adopting automated meter reading technology for real-time water data. Again, this would support and assist with leak detection and water conservation. We also talked about the feasibility of monthly or bi-monthly billing, along with a potential leak forgiveness program. Again, that information is still to come. But something I wanted to mention, and I did bring this forward to our Director of Public Works and our CAO, is I recently had the opportunity to meet with representatives from Landscape Ontario. Landscape Ontario is a not-for-profit trades organization that has begun partnering with municipalities across the country or across the province to provide residents with resources and education on reducing residential water consumption and lowering water bills. They are currently seeking municipal partners to act as a connector between their organization and local residents. And again, I've made that contact with the CEO and the Director of Public Works. So hopefully those are also some initiatives, Councillor Moore, that can be supportive of your residents as well. And I know more will come regarding this.
Not seeing anything else further. All those in favor? And that has carried. We are now moving on to our verbal updates. County. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. County updates. One of the topics was actually waste management, which is a very, very heavy topic at the county level. It seems that every couple of council meetings there, it's a topic of discussion. Certainly with circular materials taking over the recycling piece, that has been a bit of an issue, and I'm going to ask Councillor Moore to speak to that in a minute. What I did want to say is that the IC&I, and that's industrial, commercial, institutional properties, the county was kind of looking at the gap that was left when circular materials came on board as mandated by the provincial government to look after the recycling needs. There were some areas that were going to be missed, and county council decided to go status quo, which means that it's up to those individual industrial, commercial, and institutional properties to still look after their own recycling and advocate on their behalf to the provincial government to see if the provincial government would pick up the slack. That was something that the county had advocated for some time, so that our community groups and that have recycling needs, they were being serviced by the county before, and now Circular Materials has taken it over. So it's rather expensive for the county to continue to undertake that, and that burden would be placed onto residential tax base. So there wasn't an appetite for that, but certainly to advocate to the province to encourage the province and producers to expand the recycling services in order to include those particular industrial, institutional, and commercial locations. The other item I wanted to speak about is, and I found this one quite interesting because that actually brought up by Bradford West Gwillimbury, a situation that they had where they were looking for illumination on a county road. And it was an interesting conversation because I recall previous term we had looked, or I had discussed with our Public Works Department about Highway 93 at Floss Road 10 East there. It's on a uphill grade if you're going north, and the left-hand turn lane really doesn't exist. It's actually a passing lane, and the only thing there is a sign that indicates, hey, beware of cars turning left. But there is a post there that would be quite suitable to illuminate that intersection. And we kind of looked at it before, and basically the county responded on that particular question, saying that it could be done, but it would be done at Springwater Township's own expense. So as a result of this discussion that Bradford West Gwillimbury brought up, the county council did direct staff to look at their regional roads throughout the county and see if they might be able to identify certain areas that would benefit from illumination at those intersections where it's very, very poor and high risk of traffic collisions and that sort of thing. So those were a couple that seemed to take us quite a bit of time to deal with. But there was a presentation by Circular Materials that was quite interesting, and I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Moore, who was the alternate in attendance at council there, and give her an opportunity to speak to it. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Coughlin. Just thought I'd take the opportunity to speak to a couple of items Circular Materials brought up, and I know that similarly, these items were brought up at this table, and concerns with the transition over the January-February timeframe. What they've reported back is that there were weather delays, there was increased volume due to the holiday season. Throughout January and February, Simcoe County experienced significant and above average snowfall, combined with a province-wide salt shortage, which led to underserviced roads and extremely difficult driving conditions. When safety becomes an issue for their drivers, collections are delayed, which has caused, and it did cause some disruptions across the province and Simcoe County in particular. There was 5 days in January that MTARA was unable to complete their collection due to weather. And unfortunately, this resulted in long wait times for residents, heavy call volumes for staff in January. They have worked to reduce their wait times with increased fleet and staffing levels to support rapid response. During the meeting, it was also noted that they're learning about the county as a whole. The county's not the same across the geography. So some locations up in the north have trouble with bears, so they had to deal with open containers and sort of rodents and anyway, all sorts of different things. What I wanted to highlight is that there are contact numbers, contact emails, and there are customer care numbers that you can reach out to. There's a first point of contact, second point of contact, and then redirecting. There's also council contacts for us. I did ask Jenna in communications to please include this in the newsletter, in our next newsletter, so residents will have all that information going forward. That's it.
Councillor, yes, Alexander and then Garwood.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I'm not really sure if it's appropriate to ask questions at this point, but if I could potentially ask yourself or the deputy mayor. Thank you, Councillor Moore, for that information. I understand, obviously, with weather and those circumstances, but my question to county or then to the company that is now doing this is, previously, if I missed, my garbage day was missed because of whether they come the next day. And that, at least that's not what I heard was happening. So if one of you can just bring that up and ask that question so we can have that answer for our residents, unless you happen to know, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. It's just information that would be valuable.
Deputy Corral?
Yeah, basically, Mterra, surprisingly enough, have the same technology on their trucks as the county does. So they know if someone phones in and says, hey, my recycling was out, you didn't pick it up, they'll be able to track it, look at it, and tell you exactly what time the truck went by. The situation that Councillor Moore alluded to, we actually had roads where our trucks couldn't make it through for their regular pickup. Mterra, being brand new on the job, they didn't have that same ability to do that. And in some cases, my road was closed for more than one day. So, and they're trying to do that. They did say that I think the reduction in calls to them, complaint calls, had dropped by over 25%. Since January, and the number of missed calls, because they will go back. If they miss you and they look and check, they said that they will make sure that they go back. If they miss the whole street, my understanding was that they would return there to pick up. But depending, same as the township or the county, if the roads are too bad and they can't make it, then they can't make it. But my understanding was that they would come back to pick up again.
Follow on to that, and I'm not aware if there's a set policy where it was, but the county, we knew what our other date was, so I think that can be included in the correspondence. We'll see if residents do need to call in that they've been missed, or if that there is a set date. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. And just to elaborate a little bit further on what they're doing to troubleshoot some of these issues, they've created a multi-channel communication strategy. So they are going to be reaching out in a more fulsome way to residents, mail, flyers, and so that folks know what to expect, particularly. And then if there are missed days, they're going to know if they're coming the next day or not at all. And so those media relations and issues management strategies are coming. And so they're a work in progress.
Thank you. And I'm assuming this is about streetlights and the long list that you have going for those, so we can just add 93 and 10 to that. Councillor Garwood.
It's like you can read my mind, Mayor Coughlin. So just wanting to go back to the Mterra and the circular materials presentation. First of all, I was really glad to see them at County Council, and Councillor Moore did forward me over the presentation afterwards. Understanding I had brought forth direction as we did share our concerns from Springwater residents. What I would also like to say, and what has been a great resource, is MPP Downey's office as well has been a great resource. The person that's a great resource is sitting in the room right now, but I thank them for their contacts and their information as well. As resident concerns came forward, we were able to go directly through a provincial resource after folks had tried many times to contact Mterra directly. I would say that the calls that I have received from residents have significantly lowered. They still exist. There are still missed pickups. I will say, again, understanding that we've had significant weather, understanding they are new, so I want to be respectful of that and have that grace period. We also had a challenging winter last year, and through the county services did not have as many challenges as we had this year. So something to think about. Hopefully things continue to get better in the future. But on the other note, regarding the street the light posts, again, another welcomed addition, I think, is that's going to be helpful. I have a couple roads that I'm already working with your county team on, Deputy Mayor Cabral and Mayor Coughlin, and they've been excellent so far, providing the information necessary to hopefully be able to partner. So I'm glad to see precedent was made by Brampton, West Gwillimbury, or Bradford.
Close enough. Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I think what I took away from that too, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that at county locations where the municipality wanted to put something in, there were opportunities where there was a cost sharing ability. And the other piece was that if you want it that bad and they're not prepared to do it, because they go by warrants, and if it doesn't meet the criteria, they're not going to implement it, that they basically, I got the sense that if township wants to pay for it, they're okay with that being done as well. So just something to think about going forward. Councillor Garwood, if there's a spot that you feel is that necessary, then maybe there's opportunity to do it through the township.
Moving on to municipal updates. Councillor Fisher?
Actually, it's my municipal updates sort of pertain to what we're talking about tonight. And I thank council for supporting me in getting a blinking light on Pools Road and Old Second. Not too long ago, it was recently installed. And, you know, I was doing it to appease some residents out there who felt it would be of some value. But I can tell you on the morning commutes when visibility is almost nothing, it is really excellent. So given the snowfall that we've had and situations where we used warming centers and fog, I would actually suggest if anyone takes a ride down Pools Road and sees it, I don't suggest going when visibility's next to nothing, but it's been excellent. So, you know, so that's my municipal update. It's about a light.
Councillor Garwood?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. A few items to mention. First being, I did already speak to it previously, but the exciting news about Life Labs expansion of service in Elmvale. This is great for the entire township for many years now. Life Labs has been operating Tuesdays and Thursdays out of the Springwater Health Services Center in Elmvale from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., which we know as a father of three, getting three kids out the door at 7 a.m. to get to Life Labs is challenging. So I know the expanded hours are welcomed by many folks. It also allows us to utilize the space more. And Life Labs has been a great partner with us, and they were very excited to offer that expansion up, which is great. Shifting gears a bit, wanting to provide an update, not the update that I wanted to provide on Craft Hockeyville, but while we know the initiative was a great effort put forth by the Elmvale Harvesters, Elmvale was not selected as the recipient for 2026. Blackstock Ontario was, so we congratulate them. We know investment into small town arenas is important no matter where it is. I still think we should have won, of course, but we've learned what to do, how to do it, and we're going to come back even stronger next year. We saw thousands of interactions online, and we were up there. So we should be, as a community, very proud about the initiative that was put forward. Speaking of the Harvesters, I do want to congratulate them on a successful season. It was their first OEHL season, and I know I've spoken about them and what they have done for not only the Elmvale community, but Springwater as a whole many times at this table, because it is that important. Not only what they've done on the ice, of course, 28 games, 19 wins, that's astounding just for one season, for its first season, but what it's done in the sense of pride and morale and economic development support and just bringing people into a sleepy community in the middle of January on a Saturday night when it would have been probably pretty quiet. And it changed things. It gave us something to do. I was joking with a few people last week, said, what are we going to do on Saturday nights now that we don't have these games? But we're already getting ready and excited for next year. So wanting to formally congratulate them on everything that they've done. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was this past weekend, the Elmvale Community Recreation Association was able to host our annual St. Patrick's Day dance and fundraiser. We sold out 200 tickets, which is pretty exciting. And that evening, we were able to make a $3,000 donation from the Elmvale Community Recreation Association to Hospice Simcoe and the Season Center for Grieving Children. So Councillor Moore, I know you'll be excited about that. But again, it was a great night, and we were able to support a great organization as well. Thank you.
And Jamie Williams was awesome, as per usual. And if you missed him on that Saturday, you can get him at the maple syrup dance. So he's coming back. Any further updates? Not seeing any. We will move on now to our notice of motion, which is Councillor Fisher, and a seconder for this, please. Councillor Moore. Councillor Fisher?
Excellent. Pretty self-explanatory, guys. That council directs staff to install deer crossing signs at both approaches of the S Bend on St. Vincent Street to alert motorists of possible wildlife crossings. You know, this week. There is quite a bit of wildlife that does cross there, notably turtles and occasionally deer. But we did have a deer get hit this week, did some damage to somebody's car. So I think it would be, people in the community have asked me for signage on both sides. So hope for your support on that.
Straightforward, and I'm not seeing any staff members jumping up out of their chair. So at this time, I have moved and seconded that council direct staff to install deer crossing signs at both approaches on the S Bend on St. Vincent Street to alert motorists of possible wildlife crossings. All those in favor? That has carried. Are there any other notices in motion this evening? Any items for future consideration? We'll now move on to our bylaws. May I have a mover and seconder for the bylaws, please? Councillor Alexander, Deputy Cabral. Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna read them and then I'll that the bylaws listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. We have the 2026-014 mandatory septic inspection reinspection bylaw, 2026-015 professional health services hub and ad hoc committee appointments, 2026-016 to amend Elmville Business Improvement Area, and then 2026-017 amend Elmville Community Recreation Association appointments, 2026-018 amend procedure bylaw, 2026-019 amend fill and site alteration bylaw. And Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I just wanted to say public congratulations to the new members for the Professional Health Services Complex Ad Hoc Committee. Very excited to have Janice Scott on board and Robert Savage on board, two fantastic and very experienced Ward 4 residents that are also equally excited to be part of this committee. So congratulations to both, and I'll be in touch soon.
Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. On a similar note, item 16.4, which is the amendments and appointments to the Elmville BIA. I've again spoken about the BIA many times at this table, but I do think it's important to highlight this. Many years ago, when I first joined the BIA, there was not even enough folks to make up a full board. And we've now been just delighted with the opportunity to see so many business owners that want to participate in making the business community stronger. At our most recent AGM, we did have the opportunity of appointing a secretary and bring on 2 new business owners into the fold to create a full complement of a board, which is exciting. Even though the complement of that board will only run until the end of this term, the BIA felt its importance to appoint those members now, have council's support so we can continue to do that great work for the Elmville business community as well. So I wanted to congratulate those new members.
Not seeing any further comments. All those in favor? That has carried. And mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw, please. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Moore, that bylaw 2026-020 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on March 18th, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? And our adjournment, please. Councillors Alexander and Garwood, that the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 9:50 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on April 1st, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried.